Hey there, tonight we're diving into Christmas in the Byzantine Empire, where emperors mingled with icons and holy relics. And the truth is, their festive feasts were more about political prowess than peace on earth. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. In a world where Christmas involves frantic shopping sprees and jingle bell earworms, the Byzantine Empire had its own unique way of ringing in the holiday season. Forget cozy fireplaces and stockings hung with care. Byzantine Christmas was more like the Met Gala meets a medieval power play. Cue Emperor Constantine, a man who didn't just play a role in Christmas. He practically authored its script in the ancient world. It was around 336 AD when Constantine, having recently decided Christianity was the empire's new official vibe, thought Christmas could use a little imperial flair. Picture this. Instead of a simple nativity scene, you get a sprawling festival that would make today's event planners sweat in their holiday sweaters. Now, Constantine wasn't just about decking the halls. He was about decking the empire with Christianity, and Christmas became a convenient vehicle for that mission. The Great Palace in Constantinople, think the White House meets the Vatican with a touch of Versailles, was the epicenter of these grand celebrations. We're talking opulent feasts that turned modern holiday dinners into sad, microwaved leftovers. The food, a cornucopia of decadence, roasted meats, exotic spices, and enough honey-drenched pastries to make your dentist weep. And the guest list, a who's who of Byzantine high society, all gathered to witness a spectacle that was as much about flexing political muscle as it was about celebrating the birth of Christ. But before we go all starry-eyed over the grandeur, let's tackle the not-so-subtle blend of pagan and Christian customs that flavored these celebrations. You see, Constantine was a strategic genius, and he knew that a little pagan spice would make the Christian dish more palatable for the masses. Early Christmas in the Byzantine Empire was like the original mash-up, borrowing liberally from the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which featured feasting, gift-giving, and a general air of merriment. Sound familiar? It should. Constantine's genius was in rebranding these elements under a Christian banner, thus making the transition to the new religion a tad smoother for his subjects. Of course, Constantine's Christmas wasn't just about holly and jolly. The emperor's celebrations were deeply political, a flashy reminder of his divine right to rule. The ceremonies at the Great Palace weren't just for show. They were potent symbols of Constantine's power and the empire's unity under Christianity. Picture the emperor, clad in his finest regalia, presiding over the festivities like a benevolent guard king. This wasn't just a holiday, it was a statement, and every lavish detail was meticulously orchestrated to reinforce the emperor's authority. While Constantine was busy weaving his Christmas tapestry, let's not forget the economic undertones that made these celebrations possible. The Byzantine Empire was a vast and wealthy realm, with trade routes stretching from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. This wealth wasn't just about filling imperial coffers. It funded the kind of opulence that made Christmas at the Great Palace possible. Exotic goods flowed into Constantinople, from spices to silks, fueling the empire's economy and, by extension, its extravagant holiday celebrations. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, there was a more complex narrative at play. The Byzantine Empire's attempt to market Christmas as a wholesome family affair had its own curious twists. On one hand, you had the idealized image of families gathered to celebrate the birth of Christ. On the other, a reality where political intrigue and social maneuvering were as much a part of the festivities as the feasting and prayer. The Great Palace wasn't just the heart of the empire. It was a stage where alliances were forged, rivalries simmered, and the future of the realm was quietly negotiated over goblets of wine and plates of roasted pheasant. The fusion of pagan and Christian customs didn't always sit well with everyone. Early church leaders faced the challenge of steering the faithful away from the more hedonistic elements of Saturnalia while maintaining the holiday's appeal. It was a delicate balancing act, like trying to keep a New Year's resolution at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The clergy's job was to ensure that Christmas remained a time of spiritual reflection rather than devolving into a bacchanalian free-for-all. This tension between sacred and secular, spiritual and political, defined the Byzantine Christmas experience. And what of the common folk, those who didn't dine at the emperor's table or attend the lavish ceremonies at the great palace? For them, Christmas was a time of simpler joys, though still colored by the empire's complex tapestry of faith and tradition. While the elite feasted on delicacies, the average Byzantine citizen might partake in more modest celebrations, attending church services and enjoying whatever humble feast they could muster. Yet, even for them, the emperor's grand display was a powerful reminder of the empire's might and the pervasive reach of the new Christian order. In the end, Constantine's Christmas was a masterclass in PR, a savvy blend of tradition and innovation that set the stage for centuries of holiday celebrations to come. It was a time when emperors were as much showmen as they were rulers, and Christmas was a spectacle that dazzled and awed, leaving a legacy as complex and multifaceted as the Byzantine Empire itself. As we unwrap the layers of history, it's clear that the story of Christmas in Byzantium is as richly woven as the tapestries that adorn the Great Palace, a reflection of a world where faith, politics, and tradition danced in a delicate and often dazzling ballet. Now, let's turn the Byzantine dial to the glittering world of icons, the empire's Christmas gift par excellence. Imagine if today's Black Friday frenzy had a spiritual twist, because that's precisely what the Byzantines managed to achieve with their religious artworks. Forget about jostling for a flat-screen TV. In Constantinople, object of desire was a meticulously crafted image of Christ, the Virgin Mary, or a revered saint. These weren't just paintings. They were your ticket to divine favor, social standing, and a touch of heavenly bling that would make a Kardashian blush. The Byzantine Empire's obsession with icons was like a cross between a religious revival and a high-stakes art auction. These sacred images were crafted with gold leaf, precious pigments, and sometimes even encrusted with jewels. Talk about a gift that keeps on giving. Icons were so much more than religious devotion. They were a status symbol, a public declaration of piety, and let's be honest, wealth. Owning a particularly exquisite icon could elevate your social standing faster than you could say, Amen. Now, let's talk numbers. By the height of the icon craze, prices for these holy masterpieces could rival the GDP of a small nation. We're not kidding. An icon could set you back a cool 100 gold solidi, roughly equivalent to the cost of a small villa. For context, a skilled worker in Constantinople might earn about 12 solidi a year. So owning an icon wasn't just a matter of faith. It was a fiscal feat, a way to flaunt your wealth and devotion simultaneously. The demand for icons was so intense that workshops in Constantinople were practically humming with activity. The city's artisans, skilled in the delicate art of iconography, were the medieval equivalent of today's top fashion designers. Imagine the workshop of a master iconographer, apprentices grinding pigments, gold leaf being applied with painstaking precision, and the air thick with the scent of varnish and ambition. These workshops weren't just crafting religious art. They were fueling an economic engine that drove the local economy, and by extension, the empire's prosperity. But let's not romanticize this too much. The origins of some icons could be as dubious as a politician's campaign promises. Not every icon had a divine backstory, and the market was rife with forgeries and dubious provenance. Some icons were claimed to be painted by angels or miraculously appeared in a vision, but more often than not, they were the handiwork of a skilled but decidedly human artisan. The trade in icons was a mixed bag, little faith, little fraud, and a whole lot of commerce. But why were these icons so important? Beyond their artistic and economic value, they played a crucial role in Byzantine spirituality. Icons were considered windows to the divine, a way to glimpse the sacred amid the mundane. In a world where the line between the earthly and the divine was as thin as a Byzantine gold coin, icons were a tangible connection to the heavens. They adorned churches, homes, and even public spaces, a constant reminder of the empire's Christian identity. Yet, like any good story, the tale of Byzantine icons has its share of intrigue and conflict. The rise of icon veneration sparked fierce debates within the church and the empire. Was it idolatry, or a legitimate form of worship? This question would eventually lead to the iconoclast controversy, period of religious upheaval that saw icons being destroyed and their defenders persecuted. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's revel in the splendor of a Byzantine Christmas, where icons were more than mere gifts. They were a reflection of a vibrant, complex culture that danced on the edge of the sacred and the worldly. In this world of gilded halos and divine imagery, the economic impact of icons was as significant as their spiritual one. The production and trade of icons created jobs, stimulated the economy, and linked Constantinople to a vast network of trade routes that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. It was a testament to the Byzantine talent for combining faith and finance, creating a legacy that would echo through the centuries. As we wrap up this chapter of Byzantine Christmas lore, it's clear that icons were more than just art. They were a symbol of the empire's identity, a testament to its religious fervor and its worldly ambitions. So next time you find yourself caught up in the holiday shopping frenzy, remember the Byzantines and their sacred splurges. In a world where faith and finance often intersected, icons were the ultimate Christmas gift, a reminder that even in the midst of opulence and power, the quest for the divine remained at the heart of the Byzantine experience. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the fascinating tapestry of Byzantine Christmas, where emperors, icons, and holy relics collide in a dance as intricate as the empire itself. And speaking of Byzantine sacred splurges, let's dive into the ultimate Christmas wishlist items of the era, holy relics. If you thought your grandmother's obsession with collecting porcelain figurines was intense, wait until you hear about the Byzantines and their divine memorabilia. From fragments of the true cross to saintly bones, these were the must-have items for any devout Byzantine, or any emperor hoping to flash his spiritual cred. Imagine a world where the hardest gifts were slivers of wood or bits of bone, each with a backstory more outlandish than the last. Take the true cross, for instance. This was no ordinary piece of timber. It was believed to be part of the very cross upon which Jesus was crucified. Owning a piece of it was akin to having the Holy Grail in your living room. By the 4th century, Empress Helena, Constantine's mother, was credited with discovering the true cross in Jerusalem, and from that moment on, it seemed like everyone wanted a splinter. Fast forward a few centuries, and the empire was positively buzzing with bits of true wood, each claiming to be the real deal. It's as if every carpenter in Jerusalem had a side gig producing these sacred souvenirs. Now, let's talk economics. A fragment of the true cross could sell for an eye-watering sum, sometimes fetching the equivalent of several years' wages for a skilled worker. This wasn't just a matter of faith. It was a full-blown market, with relics being bought, sold, and sometimes stolen faster than you could say hallelujah. The most prized relics were housed in lavish reliquaries. Think jewel-encrusted cases that made Fabergé eggs look pedestrian. These weren't just containers. They were statements, proclaiming the owner's wealth and piety in equal measure. And then there were the relics of saints, those holy individuals whose lives were so venerated that even their remains were considered treasures. The trade in saintly relics was so brisk it could put the modern art market to shame. The bones of St. John the Baptist, St. Peter, or St. Paul, heart commodities. Even the dust from a saint's tomb could be worth its weight in gold. It's no wonder the Byzantines were so invested in relics. Each one was a tangible piece of the divine, a direct line to spiritual power. Yet not all relics were created equal, or honestly, even genuine. The Byzantine knack for production extended into the realm of relics, with provenance stories that would make a modern scam artist look like an amateur. Some relics had origins as murky as the Bosphorus on a foggy day. Take a piece of bone, slap a saint's name on it, and voila, instant relic. It was a time when faith met commerce in a dance as intricate as any Byzantine mosaic. The Byzantines didn't just collect relics for personal veneration. They used them as potent political tools. Emperors wielded relics like divine endorsements, bolstering their authority and legitimacy. Bringing a revered relic to the capital was akin to hosting a modern-day Olympics. It was a prestige event, a show of power and influence. And since relics were seen as conduits of divine favor, having them on your side could sway public opinion, reassure allies, and intimidate rivals. It was a masterstroke of political theater, a way to say, God is on my side, without uttering a word. Of course, the Byzantine Christmas season was the perfect backdrop for the display of these sacred treasures. Imagine the great palace, decked out not just in opulent decorations, but also in the holiest of relics, each one a beacon of divine protection for the empire. The emperor might process through the streets of Constantinople, flanked by relics, in a display that was as much about asserting his earthly power as his heavenly mandate. It was Christmas, Byzantine style, a festival that was part religious devotion, part political pageantry. But let's not get too starry-eyed. For all the reverence and ritual, the Byzantine relationship with relics was as complex as the empire itself. While some saw them as genuine connections to the divine, others viewed them with skepticism. After all, when every other church claimed to have the head of St. John the Baptist, someone had to be fibbing. It was a testament to the Byzantine ability to blend faith with a healthy dose of pragmatism. In the end, the Byzantine fascination with holy relics was about more than just spiritual devotion. It was a reflection of a society where the sacred and the secular were inextricably linked, where faith was a currency as valuable as gold. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of Byzantine Christmas, remember that behind every relic, every piece of the divine, lay a story as rich and layered as the empire itself. Stay tuned for more intrigue and insight as we delve deeper into the Byzantine world, where emperors, relics, and icons wove together a narrative as complex as any saga of old. The Byzantine Empire's Christmas season wasn't just about divine relics or sumptuous feasts. It was the perfect stage for political theater, where emperors and courtiers danced a complex waltz of power plays, strategic marriages, and alliances that would make even Machiavelli blush. Picture this, the great palace as a medieval house of cards, where the stakes were higher than a Byzantine dome, and the players as ruthless as any modern-day political operative. Let's kick things off with a look at the high-stakes game of matrimonial chess. In Byzantium, marriages weren't just about love, or even lust, for that matter. They were political maneuvers as carefully calculated as a military campaign. Emperors viewed marriage alliances as a way to solidify power, secure alliances, and occasionally to keep enemies closer than friends. Take the case of Emperor Constantine Roman VII, who cleverly married off his daughter to a Hungarian prince. This wasn't merely a romantic gesture. It was a geopolitical strategy to secure Byzantine influence over the ever-volatile Danube frontier. But don't think these unions were all sunshine and roses. Sometimes they were more like a medieval version of reality TV drama. Behind the scenes, you had ambitious in-laws, scheming courtiers, and would-be heirs, all jockeying for a slice of the imperial pie. One wrong move, and you could find yourself on the wrong end of a poisoned chalice, or worse, locked away in a monastery faster than you could say, Byzantine intrigue. And speaking of intrigue, let's not forget the festive season's penchant for sealing backroom deals. The Byzantines were masters of the artful negotiation, and what better time to conduct delicate diplomacy than under the guise of holiday revelry. The Christmas season provided the perfect cover for clandestine meetings and whispered conspiracies. Picture this. Ambassadors from rival states invited to the great palace, ostensibly to partake in the season's merriment, but really to hammer out deals that could make or break dynasties. Now, let's talk about some of the more infamous episodes in Byzantine holiday history. One standout is the tale of Empress Theodora and her unyielding grip on power. After the death of her husband, Emperor Theophilos, Theodora navigated the treacherous waters of Byzantine politics with a skill that would have made a cat proud. She managed to safeguard her young son's claim to the throne while keeping a tight leash on potential usurpers. During the Christmas season, Theodora's court was a hotbed of power plays, with the Empress deftly balancing alliances and keeping potential rivals at bay with a mix of charm and steely resolve. But let's not be too quick to romanticize Theodora's reign. Her hold on power was as tenuous as a Byzantine mosaic, with cracks that ran deep. She faced constant threats from ambitious generals and disgruntled aristocrats, all eager to exploit any perceived weakness. It was a never-ending game of political whack-a-mole, with Theodora using the festive season's distractions to reinforce her position while quietly quashing dissent. Of course, not all holiday maneuvering was about maintaining power. Sometimes it was about reclaiming it. Enter the saga of Michael Roman VIII Palaiologos, who pulled off one of the most audacious political comebacks in Byzantine history. After seizing the throne in a coup worthy of a Hollywood blockbuster, Michael faced the daunting task of legitimizing his rule. Cue the Christmas season, with its pageantry and ceremonial splendor, as the perfect backdrop for his grand display of power. Michael knew that to secure his dynasty, he needed the church's blessing and the people's support, and he skillfully used the holiday celebrations to project an image of divine approval and imperial might. But Michael's path to power wasn't all Christmas cheer. It was littered with betrayals, exiles, and a fair share of backstabbing, both literal and metaphorical. In true Byzantine fashion, Michael's rise involved outmaneuvering rivals and placating former enemies, often with promises as empty as a post-feast wine goblet. His ability to navigate these treacherous waters was a testament to his political savvy, proving once again that in Byzantium, the line between saint and sinner was often blurred. Yet, for all the drama and intrigue, the Byzantine Christmas season was also a time of genuine festivity. Amidst the political machinations, there was still room for celebration, with lavish banquets, religious ceremonies, and public entertainments that brought a sense of unity and shared identity to the empire. The great palace would be a hive of activity, with courtiers and commoners alike joining in the festivities, a reminder that even in a world driven by power and ambition, the spirit of the season could still shine through. In the end, the Byzantine Christmas was a microcosm of the empire itself, a complex tapestry of faith, politics, and human ambition. It was a time when emperors could wield power as easily as they lifted a goblet of wine, and where the echoes of ancient traditions danced alongside the ever-looming spectre of change. So, as we continue to unravel the layers of Byzantine history, remember that behind every glittering facade, there lay a web of intrigue, as intricate as any of the empire's famed mosaics. Stay tuned for more tales of Byzantine splendor and skullduggery, where emperors, icons, and holy relics collide in a narrative as richly woven as the empire itself. And as the glittering mosaic of Byzantine history unfurls, we find ourselves at the grand finale, pondering the empire's Christmas legacy and how it echoes in our own frenzied holiday season. Fast forward to today's tinsel-laden chaos, and you'll see that the Byzantines were the original architects of holiday extravagance. Sure, the great palace has long since crumbled, but its echoes still resonate in our love for holiday spectacle and excess. First, let's talk feasts, because who doesn't like a good holiday meal? Byzantine Christmas dinners were the stuff of legend, with tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, decadent pastries, and spices so exotic they'd make a modern foodie weep with envy. This wasn't just dining. It was a culinary symphony that played out in dining halls across the empire. Today's holiday feasts, with their turkey and trimmings, owe a nod to these ancient gatherings where food was as much a political statement as a culinary delight. Forget calorie counting. In Byzantium, a successful feast was measured not in nutritional value, but in sheer opulence. The modern-day Christmas dinner might not feature peacock pie or flamingo tongues, but the spirit of indulgence is alive and well. Just ask anyone who's ever attempted a post-holiday diet. Icons, meanwhile, have left a more subtle but equally enduring mark on our holiday traditions. In Byzantium, these sacred images were more than mere art. They were conduits to the divine, a way to brush shoulders with the celestial without leaving your living room. Fast forward to today, and you might see their influence in the holiday cards adorned with religious imagery, or the star atop a Christmas tree, evoking a sense of the divine in the midst of holiday chaos. Sure, most of us aren't shelling out the GDP of a small nation for a piece of holy art, but the Byzantine love for icons as spiritual and social currency has its echoes in our own festive decor. And then there are the relics, the crown jewels of any Byzantine Christmas. These weren't just artifacts, they were tokens of divine favor, and their allure hasn't faded. The modern equivalent might be that must-have gift, the one that sparks shopping mall stampedes and online bidding wars. Just like a fragment of the true cross, these coveted items are more than their material worth. They're imbued with a certain magic, a promise of happiness wrapped in shiny paper. The Byzantines knew how to turn faith into a form of commerce, and we've done the same with our endless parade of holiday sales and limited edition releases. Now, let's not gloss over the political theater that was as much a part of Byzantine Christmas as the feasting and prayer. Holiday gatherings today may not involve emperors plodding over goblets of wine, but the spirit of strategic socializing is alive and well. Whether it's navigating office parties or negotiating family dynamics, there's a Byzantine element to the way we use the holiday season to forge alliances and mend fences. Remember, every Christmas card you send or party you attend is an opportunity to reinforce your social standing, much like the emperors of old. So as we find ourselves caught up in the whirl of modern festivities, it's worth pausing to reflect on the Byzantine legacy. Their Christmas was a tapestry of faith, politics, and spectacle, a time when the sacred and the secular danced in a delicate and dazzling ballet. And while the empire may have fallen, its influence lingers in the way we celebrate, reminding us that the more things change, the more they stay the same. As you sip your holiday eggnog or unwrap that eagerly anticipated gift, spare a thought for the Byzantines. Their world may seem distant, wrapped in the golden glow of history, but their love for spectacle and celebration is a thread that ties us across the centuries. In the end, whether it's a Byzantine banquet or a modern Christmas dinner, the essence of the season remains, a time to gather to celebrate, and perhaps to glimpse the divine amid the chaos. So here's to the Byzantines, their emperors, their icons, and their relics, a reminder that history is never as far away as we think, especially when it comes wrapped in holiday cheer. If you ever wondered what would happen if a time machine dropped a physicist into a sitcom, look no further than Albert Einstein's early years. Here's a kid who, despite the wild rumor mill, wasn't actually a classroom dunce, but rather a curious whirlwind that spun out of the typical Victorian mold. Let's kick off with a look at the young Einstein and his blend of brilliance and rebellion that would make even a punk rocker nod in approval. Born in the southern German city of Ulm on March 14, 1879, Einstein arrived just in time for the Industrial Revolution to start cranking out its steam and steel symphony. The early years in Munich, where his father Hermann and uncle Jakob ran an electrical engineering company, were filled with the hum of innovation. Imagine the young Albert, surrounded by buzzing dynamos and flickering lights, his mind already ticking away like a pocket watch on overdrive. But school was where things got interesting. Contrary to the oft-repeated myth of Einstein as a flunking student, the truth is a little less dramatic, but no less intriguing. Sure, he butted heads with the rigid Prussian education system, which valued rote memorization over critical thinking. Little Albert, with his slow, thoughtful speech, and a penchant for questioning anything that didn't make sense, was hardly the poster child for an obedient student. Yet when it came to math and science, he was far from a failure. In fact, he was light years ahead of his peers, casually mastering calculus by the age of 12. This was a kid who, instead of trading marbles, was trading theories. How's that for a nerdy flex? Einstein's school troubles, then, were less about academic incompetence, and more about a mismatch with an educational system that was about as flexible as a wrought iron gate. He found the rigid discipline and authoritarian teachers unbearable, famously quipping that the spirit of learning and creative thought was lost in the drill and drudgery of the classroom. So, when he left the Luitpold Gymnasium at 15 without a diploma, it wasn't because he was failing. He was just getting a head start on dropping out before it was cool. Yet, Einstein's life wasn't all about battling schoolmasters and solving equations. Enter the violin, an instrument that became his lifelong companion. This wasn't just a hobby picked up to fill a college applications extracurricular section. Oh no, for Einstein, music was a sanctuary. He started learning the violin at age 6, thanks to his mother Pauline. And although he initially resisted, what child doesn't? He eventually fell in love with the works of Mozart and Bach. It was said that he could have been a professional musician if he hadn't been, busy redefining physics. Now, let's address another tall tale that's more stubborn than bubblegum on a hot sidewalk, the one about Einstein being terrible at math. This myth seems to have more lives than a cat with a personal trainer. The truth, he was a math prodigy. By 15, he had already tackled differential and integral calculus like a champ. His report card from the Aargau Cantonal School in Switzerland, where he later completed his secondary education, shows top marks in algebra and geometry. It seems the legend of Einstein, the math dunce, is a testament to how even the brightest minds can be overshadowed by a good story. Einstein's curiosity was insatiable, a trait that was both a blessing and a bane for those around him. There's the famous story of the wonder he experienced at age 5 when his father showed him a pocket compass. The needle's unwavering point to the north, seemingly defying the hand that held it, was a revelation. It sparked a lifelong fascination with the invisible forces at work in the universe, a theme that would underpin his groundbreaking theories. This curiosity wasn't just reserved for scientific phenomena. He was known to question everything, from why the sky was blue to why his teachers were so fond of boring monologues. His relentless questioning could be seen as a precursor to his later scientific inquiries, where no assumption was too sacred to scrutinize. As he once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." If only we could all channel our inner Einsteins when faced with baffling IKEA instructions. So, while the legend of a young Einstein struggling in school makes for a romantic underdog story, the reality is that he was a bright, albeit unconventional, thinker whose early life was a cocktail of curiosity, rebellion, and the occasional violin sonata. His formative years weren't just about academic achievements or schoolyard mischief. They set the stage for a life driven by the pursuit of understanding the cosmos. But we're just getting started in exploring the impacts of this iconic frizzy-haired genius on the world of physics. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. So, fast forward from the young Einstein symphony of curiosity and rebellion to the year 1905, a year that would eventually be known as Annus Mirabilis, or the miracle year, in the annals of physics. And let's be clear, this wasn't some grand, premeditated scientific coup orchestrated from an ivory tower. Nope, Einstein was pulling off this Houdini act while clocking in as a third-class examiner at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. Picture it, a physics revolution brewed in the margins of patent applications, like a Shakespearean drama unfolding in a suburban office cubicle. Now, why was this year so miraculous? Because in 1905, Einstein published not one, not two, but 4 groundbreaking papers in the journal Annalen der Physik *. Each one was like a heavyweight punch to the established scientific norms. The first paper tackled the photoelectric effect, and if that sounds like a snooze fest, think again. This was Einstein's way of saying, hey, light isn't just a wave, it's also a particle. This paper laid the foundation for quantum theory, a field of science that would eventually give us everything from lasers to the smartphone you can't live without. And speaking of particles, let's smash some myths here. The idea that Einstein single-handedly invented quantum theory is as inflated as a balloon in a parade. The seeds of quantum mechanics were sown by Max Planck in 1900 with his work on black-body radiation. But Einstein took those seeds and planted a sequoia. His paper on the photoelectric effect was pivotal in proving that Planck's quantum hypothesis wasn't just a mathematical trick, but a real description of nature. It earned Einstein the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921, which is ironic considering he had a love-hate relationship with quantum mechanics, famously quipping, "God does not play dice with the universe." Next up, Einstein tackled Brownian motion, the jittery dance of particles suspended in a fluid. Before you roll your eyes and think, great, more particle talk, this was Einstein's way of providing empirical evidence for the existence of atoms. Yes, atoms. Those invisible building blocks of matter that scientists were still debating like they were Bigfoot sightings. Einstein's analysis of Brownian motion wasn't just a party trick. It delivered the statistical proof that atoms were real, making the skeptics of the day look like they'd missed the memo. And then came the headliner, the paper that would make Einstein a household name, Special Relativity. Here's where things get spicy. Einstein proposed that the laws of physics are the same for all non-accelerating observers, and that the speed of light is constant, regardless of how fast you're moving. This was revolutionary. It means time and space are not fixed, but relative. Cue the mind-blowing sound effects. According to this theory, the faster you move, the slower time ticks along for you, which isn't just a neat sci-fi plot device, but real, measurable physics. The implications of special relativity rippled through the fabric of scientific understanding like a stone tossed into a pond. Oh, and let's not forget the piece de resistance, E equals mc2. With this deceptively simple equation, Einstein connected energy, E, and mass, m, with the speed of light, c squared, showing that mass can be converted into energy and vice versa. This equation would later underpin the development of nuclear power, and on the darker side, nuclear weapons. Talk about having a weighty legacy tied to a couple of symbols. So, how did Einstein manage all this scientific wizardry while working a day job? Well, the Swiss patent office wasn't exactly the high-pressure environment you'd expect. Einstein himself admitted that the spare time allowed him to mull over his theories. Imagine a world where your 9 to 5 actually leaves you time to revolutionize physics on the side. Add to that the fact that Einstein was known for his ability to visualize problems mentally, what he called thought experiments. These weren't just daydreams, but rigorous mental workouts that helped him see beyond the page and into the very nature of reality. Yet, the romantic idea of Einstein as a lone genius toiling in obscurity is another myth worth debunking. He wasn't a solitary tower of intellect. He was part of a vibrant community of thinkers. His friends, often called the Olympia Academy, were a group of intellectuals who met regularly to discuss philosophy and science. These discussions were like a mental gym, sharpening Einstein's ideas and feeding his insatiable curiosity. Plus, there was his first wife, Milva Merrick, a physicist in her own right, who undoubtedly contributed to his thinking during those years. History often glosses over Milva's role, but she was part of the equation, so to speak. Economically speaking, Einstein wasn't exactly rolling in dough during his miracle year. His job at the patent office paid a modest salary, and he lived in a small apartment with Milva and their son, Hans Albert. Financial constraints didn't dampen his spirit or his creativity. In fact, one could argue they fueled his determination to break free from conventional thinking. He was the quintessential underdog, grappling with the cosmos from a modest perch, proving that genius isn't always housed in gilded halls. The political and social milieu of 1905 also played a role in shaping Einstein's work. Europe was a cauldron of change, with empires expanding and science racing forward. The technological advances of the Industrial Revolution were transforming the world, but they also came with a heavy dose of uncertainty and upheaval. Einstein's theories, in many ways, echoed this duality, breaking down old certainties while opening doors to new possibilities. In an era when the world was enthralled by the visible wonders of machines and factories, Einstein dared to explore the invisible forces that govern our universe. This was the real magic of his miracle year, a time when he turned the everyday into the extraordinary, proving that the universe still had secrets left to unveil. So, while the legend of Einstein as a solitary genius is alluring, the reality is a tapestry of collaboration, curiosity, and a knack for seeing the world in a way that others couldn't. The miracle year wasn't just a fluke or a stroke of luck. It was the culmination of a lifetime of questioning, exploring, and daring to think differently. And just as we're getting into the swing of things, remember, this is only the beginning of Einstein's story. There's more to unravel, more myths to question, and more cosmic conundrums to explore. Hold onto your hats, because the journey through Einstein's universe is far from over. Now, let's dive into the cosmic quagmire that is Einstein's theory of relativity. Strap in, because we're about to turn the universe into a playground where time and space can be just as bendy as Einstein's infamous hairdo. The theory of relativity isn't just a dusty relic from the physics vault. It's the backbone of modern science, the reason why your GPS doesn't lead you off a cliff, and why astronauts don't come back from space aged like a fine cheese. First off, let's tackle the big bad boy of equations, E equals mc2. It's the Bayesian of physics formulas, iconic, widely quoted, yet often misunderstood. What this neat little equation tells us is that energy, E, and mass, m, are interchangeable. They're two sides of the same cosmic coin, linked by the speed of light squared, c2. This isn't just theoretical fluff. It underpins nuclear power, where tiny amounts of mass are converted into massive bursts of energy. Think atomic bombs. Those weren't just Hollywood special effects. They were E equals mc2 in action, with all the destructive potential of a rogue elephant in a china shop. But before we get too carried away with the apocalypse, remember that this equation also fuels the sun, literally. Our daily dose of sunlight is the result of nuclear fusion, a process where hydrogen atoms in the sun's core fuse together to form helium, releasing energy thanks to our pal E equals mc2. So next time you bask in the sun, you can thank Einstein for the glow-up. Now, onto the mind-bending world of special relativity. Imagine you're in a spaceship zipping through space at a significant fraction of the speed of light. According to Einstein, as you speed up, time starts slowing down for you compared to folks back on Earth. This isn't some sci-fi trope. It's a verifiable phenomenon known as time dilation. And it's not just theoretical navel-gazing. In 1971, scientists actually flew precise atomic clocks around in jet planes to test this, and found that time indeed ticked differently for the airborne clocks compared to those on the ground. So yes, technically, astronauts do age a tad slower than we do down here, though not enough to skip the anti-aging cream. But what about gravity? While special relativity rocked the world of high-speed travel, it didn't account for the force that keeps us glued to our seats. Enter general relativity in 1915. Here, Einstein proposed that gravity isn't just a force, but a curvature in space-time caused by mass. Picture a trampoline with a bowling ball in the middle. The fabric of the trampoline dips around the ball, and any smaller object placed on it will roll towards the ball. That's space-time for you, flexible, warped by mass, and responsible for everything from the orbits of planets to the formation of black holes. General relativity wasn't just a theoretical leap, it was a practical one. Take GPS satellites orbiting Earth. They rely on precise timing down to the nanosecond, without accounting for the time dilation effects of both their high speeds and the weaker gravitational field at their altitude. Thanks to general relativity, your phone would tell you that you're in the middle of the ocean when you're really on Main Street. So, Einstein's theories aren't just for dusty lecture halls. They're navigating your daily commute. And let's talk about black holes, those cosmic vacuum cleaners with an appetite. Before Einstein, they were merely a mathematical curiosity. But general relativity showed that when massive stars collapse, they can warp space-time so severely that not even light can escape their grasp. These aren't just the stuff of science fiction. They're real, and we've seen them. In 2019, the Event Horizon Telescope captured the first image of a black hole shadow, proving that Einstein's century-old predictions hold water, or rather, hold light. Einstein's theories stretch beyond just space-time. They reshaped our understanding of the universe's origins. The Big Bang Theory, not the sitcom, owes much to the notion that the universe is expanding, an idea supported by general relativity. This theory's acceptance has fundamentally changed our cosmology, suggesting that the universe had a beginning and is still stretching like a cosmic yoga master. Now, let's talk economics. You might think these earth-shattering ideas would have netted Einstein a king's ransom, but think again. Despite his towering intellect and revolutionary contributions, Einstein wasn't exactly rolling in dough. He spent years scraping by on a modest professor's salary, and his Nobel Prize money was famously used to settle a messy divorce with Milva Merrick, his first wife. In a twist of fate, the man who redefined relativity found himself entangled in the absolute terms of alimony and marital settlements. Politically, Einstein's theories emerged during tumultuous times. The early 20th century was a whirlwind of scientific breakthroughs and geopolitical strife. Einstein, a pacifist, witnessed his theories inadvertently contribute to the development of nuclear weapons, a reality that weighed heavily on him. He famously wrote to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, urging him to beat the Nazis to the atomic punch, a letter that spurred the Manhattan Project. It's a stark reminder that scientific discovery often walks hand in hand with political and ethical dilemmas. Einstein's work didn't just alter scientific landscapes, it influenced cultural ones too. The idea that time and space are relative challenged entrenched notions of absolute reality, seeping into art, literature, and philosophy. Surrealist artists, for instance, found a kindred spirit in Einstein's fluid universe, breaking free from traditional perspectives to explore the subconscious and the abstract. It wasn't just physics that got a makeover. The entire cultural zeitgeist was shaking off its Victorian corset. But let's not canonize Einstein as a flawless genius. He had his blind spots, particularly with quantum mechanics. Despite his groundbreaking work on the photoelectric effect, he remained skeptical about the probabilistic nature of quantum theory, famously declaring, "God does not play dice with the universe." Ironically, the field he helped to ignite would become one of the pillars of modern physics. even as he remained critical of its philosophical implications. So, as we unravel the theory of relativity, it's clear Einstein's legacy is a tapestry of contradictions and complexities. He was a dreamer who grounded his visions in mathematical rigor, a pacifist whose ideas propelled wartime innovations, and a man both celebrated and scrutinized by his contemporaries. He navigated a world where scientific inquiry and societal change were inextricably linked, leaving an indelible mark on both. The story of relativity is far from over, and neither is our journey through the cosmos with Einstein as our guide. As we continue to explore the implications of his work, remember that the universe he unveiled is as enigmatic as the man himself. The path ahead is filled with mysteries yet to be solved, and who knows, perhaps the next great breakthrough is already brewing in the mind of a modern-day Einstein, contemplating the universe from an unexpected perch. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the legacy of this remarkable thinker, whose ideas continue to ripple through time and space, shaping the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Now, as we sail from Einstein's universe of relativity into the choppy seas of his later life, brace yourself for a story of paradoxes and profound impact. You see, while Einstein's equations were busy reshaping the cosmos, the man himself was navigating a world that seemed to be unraveling at the seams. The post-fame Einstein was a spectacle of contradictions, a man of peace whose work helped birth atomic warfare, a cultural icon with a private life as tangled as his theories. The rise of Nazi Germany was a catalyst for Einstein's move to the United States, a decision that was as much about personal safety as it was about ideological defiance. By 1933, with Hitler's ascent to power, Germany wasn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat for Jewish intellectuals. Einstein, with his socialist leanings and Jewish heritage, was an obvious target. When the Nazis began purging academia of Jews and dissenters, Einstein's position at the Prussian Academy of Sciences was as secure as a sandcastle in a tsunami. The man who had once been a symbol of German scientific prowess was suddenly persona non grata. In a dramatic twist worthy of a political thriller, Einstein had been visiting the United States when Hitler took power. He never returned to Germany, choosing instead to settle in Princeton, New Jersey. The land of opportunity offered him refuge, but it also presented a new set of challenges. Here was Einstein, a man who had fundamentally altered our understanding of the universe, faced with the bureaucratic maze of immigration processes. He became an American citizen in 1940, a move that reflected both his hope for the future and a resignation to the fact that returning to Germany was as likely as finding a unicorn in Times Square. Einstein's life in America wasn't just about adjusting to a new home. It was a stage for his burgeoning role as a political activist. The ivory tower of academia was no longer sufficient for a man who saw the world teetering on the brink of self-destruction. He became an outspoken critic of fascism, racism, and militarism, using his celebrity status as a platform to advocate for civil rights and pacifism. If you imagined Einstein quietly tinkering away in a lab, think again. This was a scientist who understood that equations alone couldn't solve humanity's deepest crises. His opposition to fascism was fierce and vocal. He supported civil rights leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois and spoke out against the lynching of African Americans, calling for an end to racial segregation, a stance that made him both allies and enemies. He famously declared, "Being a Jew myself, perhaps I can understand and empathize with how black people feel as victims of discrimination." This wasn't just lip service. Einstein put his money where his mouth was, joining the NAACP and speaking at Lincoln University, a historically black college. Yet, for all his public activism, Einstein's private life was a different story. The image of the kindly, absent-minded professor with wild hair belied a complex personal landscape. His relationships could be as turbulent as a summer storm, marked by infidelity, estrangement, and a tendency to put his work above all else. His marriage to Elsa, his second wife, was a partnership of convenience more than passion, and his letters often reveal a man more comfortable with abstract concepts than emotional intimacy. In the scientific community, Einstein was facing a new challenge. The world of physics was evolving, and quantum mechanics was the unruly teenager appending the household. Despite his pioneering contributions, Einstein was increasingly seen as a relic of the past, clinging to classical concepts in an era that was embracing the probabilistic nature of quantum theory. His famous debates with Niels Bohr were legendary, intellectual sparring matches that highlighted Einstein's reluctance to accept a universe governed by chance. This isn't to say Einstein was entirely out of touch. He continued to work on a unified field theory, an ambitious attempt to reconcile general relativity with electromagnetism. It was a quest to find the elusive theory of everything, a pursuit that occupied his thoughts right up until his death in 1955. Einstein's inability to complete this theory is a poignant reminder that even the greatest minds have their limits, an eternal enigma left unsolved. Economically, Einstein's life in America was a far cry from the modest means of his early career. By the time he settled in Princeton, he was a global celebrity, his name synonymous with genius. He had a comfortable salary as a professor at the Institute for Advanced Study, and his fame opened doors that would have remained firmly shut for lesser-known scholars. Yet, wealth and recognition didn't shield him from the realities of war and political tension. The specter of nuclear conflict loomed large, a consequence of his own scientific contributions that left him with a legacy as heavy as a neutron star. And then there was the public persona, Einstein the celebrity. People flocked to him like pilgrims seeking wisdom, his face as recognizable as any Hollywood star. Yet for all the adoration, Einstein remained wary of the trappings of fame. He once quipped, "To punish me for my contempt of authority, fate has made me an authority myself." The irony wasn't lost on him. He was a reluctant icon in a world that craved certainty from its heroes. Einstein's later years were a tapestry of activism, scientific exploration, and personal reflection. He was a man who had seen the best and worst of humanity, who had unlocked the secrets of the universe only to find new mysteries lurking in the shadows. His story is a testament to the enduring power of curiosity, a reminder that even in a world fraught with division and conflict, the pursuit of knowledge remains a noble endeavor. But hold on to your hats, because Einstein's journey is far from over. As we continue to explore the legacy of this remarkable thinker, we'll uncover more layers of his influence and the indelible mark he left on the world. The universe is vast, and Einstein's story is a guiding star, leading us through the complexities of science, society, and the human condition. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the life and legacy of a man who dared to dream beyond the stars, shaping the course of history in ways both profound and unexpected. As we delve into the final act of Einstein's gripping saga, it's hard not to marvel at how a single individual could fundamentally reshape our understanding of the universe while simultaneously becoming a cultural phenomenon. Einstein's enduring legacy is a cocktail of scientific breakthroughs and a public persona that somehow manages to straddle the line between serious intellect and pop culture icon, a feat few scientists can claim. Let's talk about Einstein's contributions to quantum theory. Now, if you're imagining Einstein as a quantum mechanic fixing Schrödinger's cat, you're in for a bit of a plot twist. Despite his early work on the photoelectric effect, which laid the groundwork for quantum mechanics, Einstein wasn't exactly the poster child for this new, probabilistic world. He famously sparred with Niels Bohr over the uncertainty principle, arguing that God does not play dice with the universe. Einstein, it seems, preferred his universe a bit more predictable, like a Swiss train schedule, rather than the chaotic Las Vegas craps table that quantum mechanics was turning out to be. Yet, this friction didn't diminish his role as a catalyst for the field. His work sparked debates that drove quantum theory forward, even if he wasn't always on board with where it was headed. It's the ultimate irony. Einstein, the skeptic, helped ignite a scientific revolution he couldn't fully embrace. But that's the beauty of science, isn't it? One person's doubt is another's inspiration. And in the grand tapestry of physics, Einstein was the thread that held it all together, even as he pulled against the weave. Now, onto the lighter side of Einstein, his humorous missteps, and the evolution of his image into the symbol of genius. For starters, Einstein was never one to shy away from a good joke, especially if it was at his own expense. When asked about his messy desk, he quipped, "If a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, of what then is an empty desk a sign?" It's a classic Einstein zinger, highlighting his ability to turn the mundane into the profound while keeping his tongue firmly in cheek. And then there's the iconic photo of Einstein sticking out his tongue, snapped on his 72nd birthday in 1951. It's a picture that encapsulates the playful side of a man often seen as the epitome of serious genius. This image has graced everything from dorm room posters to coffee mugs, turning Einstein into a brand as recognizable as Coca-Cola. It's a testament to how his personality, as much as his intellect, captured the public imagination. Einstein's image as a symbol of genius wasn't just accidental. It was a reflection of an era hungry for heroes. In a world reeling from wars and scientific upheavals, Einstein's frizzy-haired visage became a beacon of human potential. He was the friendly face of complex ideas, the reassuring reminder that there was order, albeit a quirky one, in the universe. The fact that his likeness is now synonymous with genius, often with a hint of eccentricity, speaks volumes about the cultural vacuum he filled. But let's not get too misty-eyed. Einstein's journey from physicist to pop culture icon also involved a fair bit of myth-making, a narrative shaped by the media, public perception, and Einstein himself. The notion of him as a lone genius is seductive, but it's also simplistic. As we've explored, Einstein's work was part of a broader scientific dialogue, one that included collaboration, debate, and even opposition. He wasn't a solitary lighthouse, but rather a crucial node in a network of bright minds. So, what would Einstein make of today's world? The universe has certainly taken a few spins since his time, with developments in technology and science that even his fertile imagination might find astonishing. Quantum computers, for instance, are turning the probabilistic nature he once resisted into a tool for solving complex problems. And then there's the Large Hadron Collider, smashing particles together to unlock secrets of the universe, a testament to the legacy of inquiry he left behind. Einstein might chuckle at how his theories underpin technologies like GPS, smartphones, and even the World Wide Web, weaving relativity into the fabric of everyday life. But he'd likely be dismayed by the political and social challenges that persist. The same human conflicts he spoke against, war, inequality, intolerance, remain stubbornly unresolved. His advocacy for peace and justice would find plenty of causes to champion in today's world, from climate change to racial equality. Yet, in a world grappling with its own relativity, Einstein's legacy offers a guiding principle: the courage to question, to explore, and to imagine beyond the horizon. His life is a testament to the power of curiosity, a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, the pursuit of knowledge is a noble endeavor. Einstein once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." It's a sentiment that resonates as strongly today as it did in his time, urging us to keep pushing the boundaries of what we know. In wrapping up this journey through Einstein's life and legacy, we're left with a portrait of a man as complex as the universe he sought to understand. He was a scientist, a pacifist, an icon, and a human being with flaws and contradictions. His story is a reminder that genius is not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions. As we continue to navigate the cosmos, both literal and metaphorical, Einstein's example lights the way, a testament to the enduring power of a curious mind. And so, we leave Einstein's tale not with a period, but an ellipsis, as the story of discovery and wonder he inspired continues to unfold, stretching into the infinite possibilities of the future. You're jolted awake by the clamor of the bustling streets of ancient Rome. The sun isn't even at its peak yet, but the city is alive and kicking, like a gladiator fresh out of the Colosseum. Today's mission, baking bread, Roman style. But before you can even think about needing dough, you need the grain. So, it's off to the Forum with you. The Forum is the throbbing heart of Rome, a chaotic blend of commerce, politics, and the occasional philosopher waxing poetic about the empire's glory. It's not all marble columns and laurel wreaths, though. Picture a crowded marketplace where sharp elbows are as common as sharp tongues. Merchants are hawking their wares with the finesse of seasoned auctioneers, and you'd better watch your tunic. Pickpockets are as much a part of this scene as the monumental temples. Your first stop is the grain merchant's stalls. Now, here's a fun fact to chew on. Rome didn't just feed itself with local produce. Nope, the empire's appetite stretched far and wide, with a significant portion of its grain coming from Egypt. Yep, good old Egypt, the ancient breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Every year, around 200,000 tons of grain made their way into Rome, ensuring everyone from the lowliest plebeian to the haughtiest senator had their daily bread. Why Egypt, you ask? Well, the Nile's annual floods made for some seriously fertile soil, perfect for growing the wheat that became the staff of Roman life. It was like the ancient world's version of that perfect Instagram brunch spot, reliable, popular, and slightly too far away for comfort. Getting all that grain to Rome was no small feat either. Picture massive ships, laden with wheat, navigating treacherous waters to dock at Ostia, Rome's bustling port. Once the grain reached the city, the real fun began. Processing grain in ancient Rome wasn't about the artisanal grind we romanticize today. Oh no, it was industrial. Picture sprawling mills powered by slave labor and animals, grinding away day and night. In fact, Pliny the Elder, that ancient encyclopedia of random facts, noted that some of these mills were so large they could process thousands of pounds of grain a day. Efficiency was the name of the game, and the Romans were its undisputed champions. Now, stroll through the Forum and notice the grain prices being loudly debated. In Rome, bread wasn't just food, it was politics. The city's leaders knew that a hungry populace was an angry populace, so they kept the grain prices steady through subsidies and handouts. It was kind of like a primitive version of a PR campaign, except instead of tweets, they used bread to keep the masses happy. And let's not forget the occasional grain shortage, which led to riots that made Black Friday sales look like a yoga retreat. But don't let the aroma of fresh bread and roasted meats fool you into thinking this place is all sunshine and rainbows. Competition among merchants is fierce. Everyone's out to make a denarius, and they're willing to cut a few corners to do it. Grain merchants often watered down their product, mixing in chaff or sand to stretch their supplies. It's like the ancient version of adding water to the ketchup bottle. This wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. Poor quality bread could lead to all sorts of health problems, and in a society where the average Roman citizen's diet depended heavily on bread, this was a recipe for disaster. As you haggle with a grain merchant, you can't help but appreciate the economic ballet playing out before you. Every deal, every exchange, is a small cog in the great machine of Roman commerce. The stakes are high, and the margin for error is slim. In this world, a loaf of bread is more than a meal. It's a statement of civic stability and personal survival. By now, you've secured your grain, congratulations. You've successfully navigated the swirling chaos of the Forum, dodged both literal and metaphorical pitfalls, and come out with the raw material for your Roman baking adventure. Next up, transforming this grainy bounty into something you can actually eat. But that's a story for later. For now, bask in the vibrant, messy, and occasionally cutthroat energy of ancient Rome. It's a world where even the simplest act of buying grain is an adventure, wrapped in layers of history, economics, and the ever-present hum of human ambition. Now that you've survived the Roman marketplace with your grain intact, it's time to turn this ancient bounty into bread. But hold on. Before you can start dreaming of golden loaves and crusty exteriors, you'll need to navigate the labyrinth of Roman baking technology. And let me tell you, it's a ride that puts your modern kitchen gadgets to shame. Welcome to the world of the pista, the Roman baker extraordinaire. These folks were no ordinary bread slingers. They were the culinary maestros of their time. In Rome, the pista was both revered and essential, straddling the line between craftsman and essential service provider. Bread was the cornerstone of the Roman diet, and the pistors were the glue holding this carb-centric society together. But don't get too carried away with the idea of them leading lives of fame and fortune. In reality, many pistors were freedmen or slaves, working the ovens day and night, their status only slightly above the dough they needed. These pistors had some nifty tools at their disposal, and they needed every one of them. First up, the trusty rotary quern, a stone mill that, while it wouldn't win any speed competitions, got the job done. Picture a couple of hefty stones grinding together, operated by slaves or donkeys. It was the ancient equivalent of a treadmill, but instead of burning calories, it was cranking out flour. These mills were the backbone of Roman baking, producing the fine flour that would become the bread of emperors and plebeians alike. Next, we have the Roman ovens, or furnaces, the heart of any bakery. Picture a domed, beehive-shaped structure made of clay or brick, radiating heat like it's nobody's business. These ovens were no joke. They could reach temperatures of up to 300 degrees Celsius, enough to bake the now famous panis quadratus. Speaking of which, let's dive into this bread with a cult following. Panis quadratus, for those not in the know, is the iconic loaf that's become a symbol of Roman baking prowess. This bread was divided into sections with deep cuts, a design that wasn't just for show. The segments made it easier to break apart and share, a vital feature in a society where communal dining was as common as dodging chariots. But don't let the Instagrammable appearance fool you. This bread was as tough as the Roman legions. The coarse flour and baking techniques made for a loaf that could double as a weapon in a pinch. If you ever find yourself in need of a makeshift discus, panis quadratus is your bread of choice. Now, let's talk sanitation, or the lack thereof, more accurately. Roman bakeries weren't exactly paragons of cleanliness. Flour dusted every surface like a perpetual snowstorm, and hygiene standards were about as strict as a toga party at a bacchanalia. It wasn't uncommon for bread to be seasoned with the occasional rodent or insect, adding a little extra protein you didn't ask for. And if you're wondering about food safety inspections, forget it. The closest thing to quality control was the baker's reputation, and even that was as reliable as a Roman aqueduct during a drought. Surprises in Roman bread didn't stop at uninvited critters. Sometimes, less than scrupulous bakers mixed in sawdust or chalk to stretch their flour supplies. It was a classic case of buyer beware. But in a world where bread was the mainstay of survival, options were limited. You either took the risk or went hungry. Despite these questionable practices, the role of the pisto was indispensable. Bread was more than just food. It was a political tool and a social equalizer. The phrase, bread and circuses, wasn't just catchy rhetoric. It was the Roman formula for keeping the peace. As long as the people were fed and entertained, they were less likely to revolt, a strategy as old as democracy itself. So, as you step into the shoes of a Roman baker for the day, remember this. Each loaf you produce is a small piece of history, a testament to the ingenuity and tenacity of an empire that fed its people with the sweat of its poorest citizens. The pistors may not have had the glamour of the emperors they served, but their work was the backbone of Roman society. It's a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories are baked into the ordinary loaves of everyday life. As you pull your bread from the oven, savor the moment. You've joined the ranks of the ancient pistors, masters of a craft that, while not always pretty, was undeniably essential. There's still much more to explore in the world of Roman baking, but for now, take a moment to appreciate the simplicity and complexity of this ancient art. And who knows, the next time you bite into a slice of toast, you might just find yourself thanking the Romans for their contributions to the world of baking, rodents and all. But don't get too comfortable. There's a whole empire of culinary adventures still to discover. Stay tuned for more Roman revelations. As you revel in the satisfaction of your freshly baked Roman bread, let's shift gears and dive into the inner sanctum of the ancient world's carb cartel, the baking guilds. Yes, you heard me right. Guilds. These weren't just casual get-togethers over a few loaves. Oh no, Roman bakers had their own cliques that wielded more power than a senator with a Caesar complex. Welcome to the Collegium Pistorum, the exclusive club for those who made dough both figuratively and literally. Picture a secret society. But instead of secret handshakes, they've got secret recipes. These guilds weren't just about sharing sourdough starters. They were political powerhouses. And here's the kicker. Membership wasn't open to just any old pisto with a rolling pin. Nope, you had to be a bona fide citizen. If you were a freedman or a slave, you were kneading on the fringes. So what exactly did these guilds do, apart from making sure their members didn't overbake the panis quadratus? Well, they were the original social networks. They controlled the supply chain, regulated prices, and even influenced government policies. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a modern-day lobbying group, except instead of pushing for tax breaks, they were ensuring the bread baskets of Rome were never empty. And let's not forget about the political clout. These bakers were serious players in the Roman Game of Thrones, minus the dragons. They knew that controlling the bread meant controlling the populace. And in a city where bread was as essential as air, these bakers had more sway than an amphitheater full of orators. They were like the silent string pullers, orchestrating the city's mood with every loaf. Now, you might be wondering, how did the government feel about these flour-flinging power brokers? Surprisingly, the authorities weren't just sitting back watching the dough rise. They were all over the bakers like a toga on a Roman senator. The state imposed rigorous regulations to keep the bakers in check and bread prices stable. They set prices, controlled the grain supply, and even dictated the weight and quality of the bread. Roman law was as thick as a stale loaf when it came to bread regulations. But let's take a moment to appreciate the irony here. While bakers had to toe the line, they also had the means to push back. It was a delicate power dance, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. If the bakers were the original influencers, then the government was the world's first fact-checker, trying to keep the bakers' claims as solid as a centurion's shield. And speaking of influence, let's talk about how these bakers managed to sway public opinion. They were the masters of ancient marketing, using their bread as a canvas for social commentary. Whether it was stamping loaves with messages or designing intricate patterns, these bakers were the Banksies of their time, leaving their mark on every table in Rome. A cleverly crafted loaf could convey allegiance, dissent, or even support for a political candidate. Who knew carbs could carry so much weight? But of course, the life of a guild member wasn't all power and prestige. There were fierce rivalries, clandestine meetings, and the ever-present threat of government crackdowns. Imagine a room full of bakers, each trying to rise to the top like a perfectly proofed dough. The competition was as fierce as a gladiatorial contest, minus the lions, but with plenty of backstabbing. Through all this, the bakers remained indispensable to Rome's stability. They were the unsung heroes, feeding the masses while subtly shaping the empire's destiny. In a world where bread was more than just food, the bakers were the architects of societal balance, using their loaves to build bridges between classes and keep the city's foundations from crumbling. As you leave the guild meeting, your head spinning with tales of political intrigue and flower-dusted power struggles, take a moment to appreciate the complexity of this ancient profession. The bakers of Rome weren't just craftsmen. They were the backbone of an empire, kneading their way through history with every loaf. And as you walk away, the scent of freshly baked bread clinging to your clothes, remember that the world of Roman baking is far from finished. There's still much more to explore, from the kitchens of emperors to the street stalls of plebeians. So stay tuned, because our journey through the doughy depths of ancient Rome is just heating up. As you leave the guild meeting, your head spinning with tales of political intrigue and flower-dusted power struggles, you might be wondering how something as simple as bread could stir up a rebellion or soothe an empire. Well, in Rome, bread wasn't just the cornerstone of the diet. It was the linchpin of social stability. The phrase bread and circuses didn't come from some ancient PR guru. It was a cold, calculated policy designed to keep the Roman populace fed and, more importantly, distracted. Let's set the scene. The Roman Empire was a sprawling behemoth with a population in the millions. Feeding all those mouths was no small feat, and it fell to the government to ensure that no Roman citizen went hangry. Enter the annona, Rome's public grain dole, a policy that doled out free or heavily subsidized grain to eligible citizens. This wasn't just an act of goodwill. It was a strategic move to keep the plebeians from revolting. After all, a well-fed citizen was less likely to storm the Senate. But here's where things get interesting. The government wasn't just trying to fill bellies. They were playing a high-stakes game of social control. By providing bread, they kept the masses pacified. And by throwing in some circuses, gladiatorial games, chariot races, and other spectacles, they ensured they were entertained enough to ignore the machinations of the political elite. It was like the world's oldest form of reality TV, except the stakes were life and death, and the prizes were decidedly less glamorous. Now, don't get too carried away with the idea that Rome was some well-oiled machine, constantly churning out bread and happiness. Oh no, the system had its hiccups. Grain shortages were not just an inconvenience. They were a crisis that could send the city spiraling into chaos faster than you can say Etruscan invasion. In 22 BC, for example, a severe grain shortage pushed Augustus himself to step in and stabilize the situation, using his own funds to secure enough grain for the people. When the emperor has to dip into his personal stash to keep the peace, you know things are serious. These shortages weren't just the result of bad harvests or pesky pirates plundering grain ships. They were often the result of logistical nightmares. Remember, Rome was importing around 200,000 tons of grain annually. The supply chain stretched from the fertile fields of Egypt to the bustling docks of Ostia, and any disruption along the way could spell disaster. It was like trying to feed New York City using only the potatoes from Idaho, but with a few more gladiators and considerably less refrigeration. When the bread ran out, the mood in Rome could turn on a Sestrius. Riots were as common as toga parties, with citizens taking to the streets to demand their due. And let's be clear, these weren't peaceful protests. They were more like ancient flash mobs, complete with fire, fury, and the occasional looting. The authorities had to tread lightly, balancing the wrath of the mob with the need to maintain order. It was a bit like juggling flaming swords while riding a chariot, thrilling to watch, but terrifying if you were the one in charge. So, what did the government do when the bread ran low and tempers ran high? They improvised, of course. Sometimes they would import emergency shipments of grain from neighboring regions. Other times they would introduce temporary measures, like selling grain at reduced prices to quell the unrest. It was a constant game of catch-up, with the authorities always one step behind the next crisis. And yet, through it all, the Romans managed to keep their empire from crumbling, thanks in no small part to their ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. Now, let's shatter a common myth, the idea that Roman citizens were always well-fed and content. Sure, the annona was a lifeline for many, but it didn't cover everyone. Only the poorest citizens were eligible, and even then, the grain dole was often supplemented by whatever they could scrounge up. Plus, the quality of the bread they received was sometimes questionable. Remember that whole sawdust in the bread trick? Yeah, that wasn't just a rare occurrence. It was a survival tactic for bakers trying to stretch their supplies. And speaking of survival tactics, let's talk about the lengths people would go for a decent loaf. In times of shortage, bread became a currency of its own, bartered and traded like gold. Stories abound of desperate citizens stealing from their neighbors or raiding bakeries under the cover of night. It was a dog-eat-dog world, with bread as the ultimate prize. The irony. In a city that prided itself on its culture and sophistication, the fight for survival often boiled down to the simplest of human needs, the need for food. Through all this chaos, one thing is clear. Bread was more than just sustenance in Rome. It was a tool of political power, a symbol of social stability, and a catalyst for change. It fed the body and the empire, binding together the disparate threads of Roman society with every loaf. And while the myth of a well-fed, content populace remains alluring, the reality was far more complex, marked by struggle, ingenuity, and the ever-present spectre of hunger. As the sun sets on another day in ancient Rome, leaving behind the clamor and chaos of the city, take a moment to reflect on the intricate dance of politics, power, and provision that defined the empire. Bread may have been a simple staple, but its impact was anything but. It shaped the course of history, fueled revolutions, and kept an empire on its toes. And though the story of Roman bread is far from over, it's clear that in this ancient world, a loaf was never just a loaf. It was a piece of history, baked fresh every day. And if you think that's all ancient Rome had to offer in its bread-fueled saga, think again. Fast forward to today, and you'll notice echoes of Roman baking practices rippling through our modern culinary landscape. Let's dive into the parallels and the potholes between then and now. First off, let's talk bread politics. The Romans knew how to wield a loaf like a sword, and this strategy isn't exactly ancient history. Today's food industry is a battleground where subsidies, tariffs, and trade agreements dictate what ends up on our plates. Take the European Union's common agricultural policy. For instance, it's a bit like the Roman annona, but with more bureaucracy and fewer togas. This policy pumps billions into the EU's agricultural sector to keep farmers afloat and food prices stable. Sound familiar? The Romans had a similar playbook, minus the spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. And what about our modern-day bread and circuses? The Romans had it figured out. Keep the populace fed and entertained, and you've got yourself a pretty stable empire. Today, we see a version of this in the form of fast food chains and reality TV. It's not quite gladiatorial combat, but throw in a few plot twists, and you've got America's next top gladiator. The strategy remains the same. Give the people what they want, keep them distracted, and watch the approval ratings soar. Now, let's address the myth of Roman bread superiority. Yes, The Romans pioneered baking techniques that laid the groundwork for modern bread making. But before we romanticize their loaves as culinary masterpieces, let's sprinkle a bit of reality on that dough. Roman bread was functional, not fancy. It was designed to fill stomachs, not win Michelin stars. The panis quadratus, with its rock-hard crust, may have been iconic, but it wasn't exactly soft and fluffy. It was more like a medieval torture device than a breakfast delight. When you consider that the average Roman's dental hygiene was as questionable as their water supply, you can imagine the dental disasters that ensued. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater or the dough with the ashes. The Romans were undeniably innovative. They were the first to establish large-scale bakeries, bringing a level of efficiency that would make Henry Ford nod in approval. These bakeries were the real deal, churning out thousands of loaves daily, powered by human and animal labor. It was an ancient assembly line, minus the robots and OSHA regulations. Let's not forget the Romans' savvy use of yeast, a practice that transformed flour and water into something much more magical and digestible. Their mastery of fermentation was a precursor to modern sourdough, and while they didn't have Instagram to flaunt their perfect crumb shots, they knew the value of a well-risen loaf. So, while Roman bread might not have been the artisanal dream we imagine, it was a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. Now, imagine a day in the life of a Roman baker compared to their modern counterpart. The Roman pista rises before the sun, fueled by determination and perhaps a touch of desperation. Their day starts with the grinding of grain at the local mill, not so much a leisurely stroll as a necessary trek. They then navigate the chaos of a bustling Roman bakery, dodging flour clouds and the occasional rodent. It's hot, it's sweaty, and sanitation is more of a suggestion than a rule. Fast forward to today's baker. They're armed with a fleet of gadgets, industrial mixers, climate-controlled proofing rooms, and state-of-the-art ovens. Hygiene standards would make a Roman's head spin faster than a rotary quern. Their biggest challenge, deciding which artisan flour to feature in their Instagram-worthy creations. And yet, despite the centuries and technological advancements, the core of their craft remains the same, transforming simple ingredients into sustenance and satisfaction. In the grand tapestry of history, the story of bread is a thread that binds us across time. It's a reminder that while our methods have evolved, our basic needs and desires remain remarkably unchanged. We still seek nourishment, both physical and emotional, and bread continues to be a symbol of community and comfort. So, as you settle down with your next slice, whether it's a crusty sourdough or a pillowy brioche, give a nod to the ancient pastors who laid the foundation for your daily bread. Their legacy is baked into every loaf, a testament to the timeless art of making something out of nothing. In the end, the Romans weren't just feeding an empire. They were sowing the seeds of a culinary tradition that endures to this day. And if that isn't worth toasting to, I don't know what is. In the dusty streets of Malaga, Spain, October 1881, a certain baby took his first breath, and the art world gasped, though it didn't know it yet. This was Pablo Diego José Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno, Crispiniano Maria Remedios de la Santissima Trinidad Ruiz Picasso. Yes, quite the mouthful. But let's just stick with Pablo Picasso, shall we? From the get-go, little Pablo wasn't your average child. By the time he was 9, while most kids were busy deciding whether to eat glue or paste it on paper, Picasso was already diving into the world of art with a fervor that could only be described as obsessive. Now, one might wonder how a kid from a modest family in southern Spain could develop such a burning passion for painting. Well, it turns out that creativity ran in the family. Picasso's father, José Ruiz y Blasco, was an art teacher and a painter himself, though not quite of the revolutionary caliber his son would become. Imagine the scene. A young Pablo, sketching away with such intensity that his father reportedly decided to hang up his own brushes, declaring he'd never be able to surpass his son's talent. Talk about a proud and slightly defeated dad moment. But let's not romanticize this too much. Despite the familial support, the Picasso household was far from swimming in luxury. They were more like dog paddling their way through financial struggles. Picasso's early years were marked by a constant hustle to make ends meet, a reality that doesn't quite fit the glamorous image of the bohemian artist that history often paints. As Pablo grew, so did his ambition, and by his teenage years, he was attending the prestigious La Larcha School of Fine Arts in Barcelona. Not exactly a walk in the park for a kid who found traditional education as appealing as a blank canvas. His teachers were a mix of awed and exasperated by his talent, watching as he broke the rules of academic painting with the kind of hubris only a teenager could muster. Imagine being a seasoned art instructor, attempting to impart wisdom to a kid who's already decided he knows better. Frustrating, absolutely. Entertaining, undoubtedly. Then came the infamous Blue Period. No, this wasn't Picasso's attempt to predict social media's obsession with mood aesthetics. It was a time of profound personal and financial hardship, beginning around 1901. His close friend, Carlos Casagemas, tragically died by suicide, a blow that sent Picasso spiraling into a deep depression. In response, his artwork took a somber turn, drowning in shades of blue and green, depicting the isolation and destitution he felt. Paintings from this period, like The Old Guitarist and La Vie, are hauntingly beautiful, but also serve as stark reminders that Picasso's early career was anything but easy. Financially, Picasso was scraping the bottom of the barrel. He lived in squalor in Paris, where he couldn't always afford to heat his studio. Picture him shivering, bundled up, painting away, while the myth of the carefree artist, sipping absinthe and swirling paintbrushes in a sunlit atelier, was far from his reality. It was a struggle, but one that seemed to fuel his creative fire rather than extinguish it. And yet, for all the hardships, Picasso's ambition never waned. His determination to push boundaries was already evident in his Blue Period works, setting the stage for the seismic shifts he would later bring to the art world. It's a classic tale of art born from adversity, except with Picasso, it's not just a tale. It's a testament to the resilience and sheer audacity of a young artist determined to redefine what art could be. So, as we wrap up this chapter of young Picasso's life, remember, the journey from Malaga's dusty streets to the cobblestones of Paris wasn't paved with gold. It was marked by grit, genius, and a healthy dose of gall. And we're just getting started. Stay tuned, because when it comes to Picasso, the only thing more colorful than his paintings is the life he led. As Picasso trudged through the dimly lit streets of Montmartre, clutching his latest masterpiece, he was about to stumble, or rather, paintbrush first, into the art world's next big thing. Enter Cubism, the avant-garde movement that would redefine art in the early 20th century, much like a smartphone redefined the phone industry. But this wasn't a one-man show. Picasso was joined by Georges Braque, a fellow artist and creative conspirator. Together, they dared to break the mold, quite literally, into geometric shards. Let's set the scene. Paris, 1907. The city was a melting pot of artistic innovation, where every café was a breeding ground for revolutionary ideas. It was here that Picasso, with his unkempt hair and burning eyes, would meet Braque, a young French painter who shared his distaste for the overly polished and realistic styles of the time. Realism had lost its charm, a bit like a flat soda, and these two were ready to shake things up. Their first foray into Cubism was like tossing a stone into a calm pond, except this stone was a boulder and the pond the placid art world. Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, painted in 1907, was the first ripple. This wasn't just a painting. It was a visual manifesto, a declaration that art didn't need to be a mirror of reality. Instead, it could be a kaleidoscope, breaking images into cubes, facets, and fragments. Gone were the soft lines and smooth forms. In their place, sharp angles, distorted faces, and a perspective that seemed to come from a dream after too much cheese. Now, you might imagine the art critics of the time sitting in their stuffy rooms, monocles dropping into their teacups as they beheld this monstrosity. And you wouldn't be far off. The initial reaction was bewilderment, a bit like trying to decipher a modern art piece titled Untitled #5. Critics described the painting as hideous and an insult to the art of painting. But Picasso and Braque, buoyed by their shared artistic vision, pressed on, unfazed by the verbal tomatoes thrown their way. Secret source of Cubism was its ability to capture multiple perspectives simultaneously. Think of it as the original 3D movie, without the glasses. Braque and Picasso were fascinated by how they could depict different angles on a flat surface, like showing the front and back of a chair at the same time. It was this innovative approach that set Cubism apart and laid the groundwork for modern abstract art. As the movement gained momentum, it also gained acceptance, albeit slowly. By the 1910s, Cubism was no longer the art world's rebellious teenager, but a respected, if still controversial, young adult. Exhibitions featuring Cubist works began popping up, and collectors, always on the hunt for the next big thing, started to take notice. Paintings that once collected dust were now fetching prices that could cover a year's rent for Picasso's studio. A rickety attic in Paris, mind you, but still. Art world was starting to catch on, and Picasso was on his way to becoming a household name. But fame, as they say, is a double-edged sword. Picasso's relationship with notoriety was as complex as one of his Cubist paintings. On one hand, the recognition was gratifying, a validation of years spent challenging the status quo. On the other, it came with expectations and pressures that would follow him like a shadow. This was an artist who thrived on unpredictability, yet now found himself in danger of being pigeonholed as the Cubism guy. Amidst this rise to fame, Europe was a continent on the brink. The political landscape was shifting more dramatically than a Picasso painting. The years leading up to World War I were marked by tension and alliances as fragile as a house of cards. The war itself, from 1914 to 1918, was a seismic event that shook the foundations of society and of Picasso's art as well. War has a way of changing perspectives, and not just in the metaphorical sense. Picasso's work began to reflect the chaos and fragmentation of the world around him. His pieces from this era, though still rooted in Cubism, exhibited a raw intensity. The angular forms took on new meanings, echoing the dissonance and destruction of the time. No longer just a radical art form, Cubism became a commentary on a fractured world, a visual representation of the world's shattered peace. Through it all, Picasso's wit remained as sharp as ever. He once quipped, "Art is a lie that makes us realize truth," a statement that could easily double as a slogan for Cubism itself. It was this playful yet profound perspective that endeared him to both the avant-garde and the everyday art lover. The absurdities of artistic fame were not lost on him, either. He was keenly aware of the irony that the same critics who once derided his work were now singing its praises, like a bandwagon rolling through the cobblestone streets of Paris. Picasso had become a cultural icon, a status that both amused and exasperated him. His fame was a glittering prize and a gilded cage, a duality he would grapple with for the rest of his life. Of course, we're not done with Picasso just yet. This was merely the opening act of a career that would span decades, a life as colorful and complex as the paintings he left behind. So keep your eyes peeled and your mind open, because Picasso's story is far from over. In the world of art, much like the man himself, the only constant is change. While Picasso's art was a kaleidoscope of innovation, his personal life was, well, more like a Picasso painting, complex, chaotic, and at times a little hard to digest. We're diving headfirst into the romantic entanglements of the man who could juggle women and paintbrushes with equal flair, if not finesse. You see, Picasso's love life was as colorful as his palette, and often just as messy. First, let's talk about the women who shaped his life and art. Picasso's relationships were tumultuous affairs. Think Spanish soap opera, but with more paint. He had a veritable lineup of muses, lovers, and wives who not only fueled his creativity, but also bore the brunt of his often volatile personality. Fernande Olivier, his first long-term partner, was a French artist's model who lived with Picasso during his groundbreaking Cubist period. She appears in numerous portraits and sketches from that time, a testament to her influence on his work. However, this wasn't exactly a fairy tale romance. Picasso's jealousy was notorious, and their relationship was punctuated by explosive arguments and reconciliations. The couple eventually parted ways in 1912, but not before Fernande had left an indelible mark on Picasso's art. Next, enter Olga Karkova, a Russian ballerina who danced into Picasso's life in 1917 and became his first wife. Olga was the epitome of grace and elegance, a stark contrast to Picasso's bohemian lifestyle. Their marriage was a union of high art and high drama, with Picasso painting her as both an ethereal beauty and a symbol of bourgeois restraint. This was no coincidence. Olga demanded stability, a concept as foreign to Picasso as a blank canvas. Their turbulent marriage eventually disintegrated in 1935, but not before giving Picasso his first son, Paulo. The economic context of this marriage is worth noting. Olga's connections boosted Picasso's social standing, allowing him to rub shoulders with the upper echelons of society. It's a classic case of marrying up, though Picasso likely saw it as merely another avenue to expand his artistic horizons. But wait, there's more. Enter Marie Therese Walter, a young woman whose relationship with Picasso began in 1927 when she was just 17 and he was 45. Cue the scandal. Marie Therese was a bright, youthful presence in Picasso's life, inspiring works like Le Rêve and Nude, Green Leaves and Bust. Her influence is undeniable, as her presence seemed to usher in a softer, more sensuous quality to his art during the late 1920s and early 30s. However, their affair was anything but smooth sailing. Picasso's simultaneous involvement with other women, including the photographer Dora Maar, led to tension and heartbreak. Marie Therese bore Picasso a daughter, Maya, but their relationship, like many of Picasso's, was fraught with emotional upheaval. Speaking of Dora Maar, Picasso met this enigmatic surrealist photographer and painter in 1936. Dora was not just a muse, but also a collaborator and intellectual equal. Their relationship was intense, marked by passionate debates and mutual artistic inspiration. Yet Picasso's penchant for emotional manipulation and infidelity took its toll on Dora. She suffered a psychological breakdown, an unfortunate testament to the darker side of Picasso's magnetism. His painting, Weeping Woman, is often associated with Dora, capturing the pain and turmoil she experienced during their time together. Now, let's bust a myth while we're at it, the tortured genius trope that often surrounds artists like Picasso. It's tempting to romanticize his behavior as the price of genius, a narrative that lets him off the hook for actions that were, frankly, less than admirable. The reality is that Picasso's relationships were complicated by power dynamics and a self-centered streak that would make Narcissus blush. He thrived artistically amid personal chaos, but this wasn't solely due to some innate brilliance. Economic stability, societal privilege, and a world willing to overlook his flaws because of his talent played significant roles in his success. It's also crucial to understand the broader cultural and economic context that allowed Picasso to thrive. The early 20th century was a time of immense change, with the art world in flux and traditional values being upended. Paris was the epicenter of this cultural renaissance, a vibrant hub where artists could experiment without the constraints of the past. Picasso's ability to navigate this dynamic environment, to leverage his connections, and capitalize on the era's shifting artistic tastes, was as much a part of his genius as his revolutionary techniques. Let's not forget the money factor. By the 1920s, Picasso had achieved significant financial success. His works were not only critically acclaimed, but also commercially viable. This financial independence afforded him the luxury to live as he pleased, to indulge in his whims and affairs without the worry of economic repercussions. In a way, Picasso was the original rock star, charismatic, controversial, and undeniably talented, living a life that blurred the lines between art and excess. So, the next time you find yourself gazing at a Picasso painting, remember that behind those distorted faces and fragmented forms lies a life as convoluted and fascinating as the art itself. Picasso's relationships, with all their passion and pain, were integral to his creative process. They were both a source of inspiration and a reflection of his inner turmoil, illustrating the complex interplay between life and art. As we leave this chapter of Picasso's story, it's clear that his personal life was a canvas in its own right, layered, colorful, and not without its darker shades. Yet, despite the chaos, Picasso's genius shone through, challenging conventions and redefining what art could be. So, hang tight, because the next act in Picasso's life promises even more intrigue, innovation, and of course, a dash of scandal. Stay tuned, because when it comes to Picasso, the only thing predictable is his unpredictability. Just when you thought Picasso's personal life was a whirlwind of color and chaos, into the next chapter, his foray into the political sphere, during a time when the world seemed set on pressing the self-destruct button. You see, while Picasso's love life was a tangled tapestry worthy of its own daytime soap, his political engagement was a more serious affair, marked by the looming shadow of the Spanish Civil War and the creation of his most politically charged masterpiece, Guernica. Now, Picasso wasn't your typical politico, marching with banners or delivering rousing speeches. No, his battlefield was the canvas, and his weapon of choice was paint. But make no mistake, his art was as potent as any political pamphlet. In the 1930s, Spain was a tinderbox, and Picasso was about to strike a match with a painting that would ignite the world's conscience. Let's set the scene. It's 1937, and Europe is a hotbed of ideological conflict. In Spain, a brutal civil war rages between the Republicans, who favored democracy, and the nationalists, led by General Francisco Franco, who were all about authoritarianism. It was a conflict that drew in international attention and intervention, with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy backing Franco, while the Soviet Union and international brigades supported the Republicans. Simple, right? Not quite. Picasso, although living in France, was deeply affected by the turmoil in his homeland. The war wasn't just a distant headline, it was personal. When the town of Guernica, in the Basque Country, was bombed by Nazi, German, and Italian fascist planes in April 1937, the world was horrified. The attack killed or wounded between 500 and 700 civilians, marking one of the first air raids on a civilian population. It was not just an act of war, but a chilling prelude to the horrors that would soon engulf the globe. This atrocity spurred Picasso into action. Commissioned by the Spanish Republican government to produce a mural for the 1937 World's Fair in Paris, Picasso channeled his outrage into Guernica, a sprawling, monochromatic canvas that measures an impressive 11 feet tall and 6 feet wide. Now, if you've ever seen Guernica, you'll know it's not exactly a serene landscape. It's a chaotic, haunting depiction of suffering and destruction, with distorted figures and anguished expressions that convey the madness of war. For Picasso, Guernica was more than just a painting. It was a cry for help, a visual protest against the senseless brutality of the Spanish Civil War. It's a piece that demands attention, much like a modern tweet storm from a celebrity activist. And just like today's Hollywood stars, Picasso leveraged his fame to amplify his message, using his art to draw international focus to the plight of his countrymen. But here's the kicker. While Guernica was undeniably political, Picasso himself was a master at playing both sides. He never officially joined any political party, preferring to maintain a degree of independence that allowed him to navigate the choppy waters of artistic and political expression. This balancing act, being an engaged artist without becoming a party puppet, was a tightrope walk that Picasso managed with remarkable skill. It's a bit like a celebrity today championing a cause without fully committing to the fray, a strategic dance between activism and art. The public reaction to Guernica was as explosive as the painting itself. It was hailed as a masterpiece, a symbol of resistance, and a visual indictment of fascism. The work toured internationally, bringing the horrors of the Spanish Civil War to audiences across the globe. It was a piece that transcended the confines of the art world, becoming a powerful tool for political discourse. In a time when news traveled at a snail's pace compared to today's instant tweets, Guernica was a blockbuster hit, an avant-garde call to action. And yet, for all its success, Picasso's political engagement extended beyond just a single painting. He was a vocal critic of Franco's regime, using his art and influence to support the Republican cause. But even as he threw his artistic weight behind political efforts, Picasso remained a complex figure, resisting easy categorization. He was an artist first and foremost, a man who thrived on the freedom to express his vision without being boxed in by political dogma. In many ways, Picasso's approach to politics mirrored his approach to art, bold, unorthodox, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. He understood the power of art as a tool for change, yet he never let it overshadow the personal, creative impulse that drove him. It's a bit like how some of today's celebrities use their platforms to champion causes, careful to maintain their brand while still making a statement. As the 1930s gave way to the 1940s, Picasso's political engagement continued to shape his work, even as the world around him descended into the chaos of World War II. The artist who had once shattered the conventions of visual art was now using his talents to confront the moral and ethical dilemmas of his time. And yet, through it all, Picasso remained a singular figure, an artist whose work defied easy interpretation and whose life was as unpredictable as his brushstrokes. So, as we leave Picasso amidst the political turmoil of the late 1930s, one thing is clear. His art was more than just a reflection of his time. It was a powerful agent of change. And while his painting, Guernica, stands as a testament to his political engagement, it also serves as a reminder of the artist's unyielding commitment to his craft. Picasso's story is far from over, and as we continue to explore his life and legacy, there's no telling what new revelations await. Stay tuned, because when it comes to Picasso, the canvas is always evolving. So, as Picasso continued to navigate the choppy waters of the mid-20th century, he remained a fixture in the art world, a bit like that eccentric uncle who always shows up to family gatherings with a new, oddly fascinating story. While the world around him was caught in the throes of World War II, Picasso was busy ensuring his art stayed as relevant as Spotify in an age of vinyl records. Let's fast forward to the 1940. Picasso, now in his 60s, was living in Nazi-occupied Paris. Despite the grim circumstances, he remained prolific, producing works that reflected the tension and turmoil of the time. Ever the rebel, he refused to leave Paris, even when the Nazis banned his art. Picture him, defiantly painting in his studio, a silent middle finger to the oppressive regime. It was as if Picasso had built his own fortress of creativity, one that no dictator could storm. During this period, Picasso's art took on a darker, more introspective tone. Works like the Charnel House and the She-Goat are imbued with a sense of dread and chaos, mirroring the war-torn world outside his door. But Picasso wasn't just painting for himself. He was painting for posterity, capturing the zeitgeist of an era that seemed determined to self-destruct. It was a testament to his belief in art, as both a witness and a warning, a conviction that would only grow stronger in the years to come. As the war ended and Europe began to rebuild, Picasso, ever the chameleon, shifted gears once again. The post-war period saw him embracing a more joyful and exuberant style, as if his paintbrush had taken a holiday from the gloom. Enter the era of the dove of peace, a symbol that Picasso would become synonymous with. His lithograph of a white dove was chosen as the emblem for the first International Peace Conference in Paris in 1949. It was a move that cemented Picasso's image as an artist for peace, a role he seemed to relish, though with his usual flair for complexity. Now let's talk legacy, because Picasso wasn't just sitting around twiddling his brushes. By the time he passed away in 1973, at the ripe old age of 91, Picasso had produced an estimated 50,000 artworks. Yes, you heard that right, 50,000. That's more pieces than most of us have sarks. His oeuvre included paintings, drawings, sculptures, ceramics, and even stage designs. If there's a medium, Picasso probably dabbled in it, like an art world Swiss army knife. And here's where things get interesting. Despite his humble beginnings as the son of an art teacher in Malaga, Picasso's works are now some of the most valuable on the planet. His painting, Les Femmes d'Alger, sold for a staggering $179. $4 million at auction in 2015. That's enough to buy a private island or, several 100,000 paintbrushes. It's a testament to how Picasso's art, much like a fine wine or a catchy pop tune, has only appreciated with time. But let's not get too misty-eyed just yet. Picasso's legacy is a tangled web, equal parts genius and controversy. The romantic image of the tortured artist, suffering for his craft, is a convenient narrative, but reality paints a more complex picture. Picasso was a man of immense privilege by the latter half of his life, a status that afforded him the freedom to create without the constraints that bogged down lesser mortals. He was a master at marketing himself, a celebrity before Instagram made it easy. Which brings us to a fun hypothetical. How would Picasso fare in today's social media-driven art scene? Well, for starters, his penchant for reinvention would make him a hit on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where artists are constantly finding new ways to engage with their audience. Imagine Picasso, iPhone in hand, live streaming his creative process, or dropping cryptic tweets that double as art world riddles. His ability to court controversy would likely make him a trending topic on Twitter, part artist, part influencer. his face gracing memes alongside those iconic distorted figures. Yet, for all his ability to adapt and innovate, Picasso's legacy is not without its shadows. His relationships with women, often marked by power imbalances and emotional turbulence, remind us that genius does not excuse bad behavior. It's a reality that complicates the myth, forcing us to reconcile the man with the artist. Picasso's life was a canvas of contradictions, a blend of light and dark that continues to fascinate and frustrate historians and art lovers alike. In the end, Picasso's impact on the art world is undeniable. He was a pioneer, a provocateur, and a perpetual experimenter who reshaped the very definition of art. His work challenged viewers to see the world through a different lens, one that embraced complexity and celebrated the unconventional. It's a legacy that resonates even today, as artists continue to grapple with the questions he posed and the boundaries he pushed. So, as we wrap up this colorful journey through Picasso's life, remember, the true measure of his genius lies not just in the masterpieces he left behind, but in the way he dared to see the world differently. Picasso was a master of reinvention, a visionary who turned the art world on its head. And in doing so, he left a lasting imprint on the canvas of history, one that continues to inspire, challenge, and captivate us all. You jolt awake to a cacophony that could rival a rock concert. Welcome to medieval London, where the morning alarm is a symphony of clanging church bells and the roars of early market traders. No snooze button here, just the relentless bustle of a city that, by the 14th century, is packed tighter than a hipster coffee shop on a Sunday. We're talking about a population explosion that took London from around 25,000 souls in 1100 to a bustling metropolis of over 80,000 by the late 1300. That's quite the crowd in a city without indoor plumbing. As you pull yourself out of the straw mattress, or if you're lucky, a slightly less pokey feather-stuffed one, you might want to brace yourself for the olfactory assault. Hygiene isn't exactly top-notch. The medieval nose had to be made of sterner stuff. Forget about a leisurely shower. Your morning ablutions will probably involve a splash of water from a basin that may or may not have been changed recently. And that's if you're among the well-off. The less affluent, they might just make do with a quick scrub from the public conduits, which are essentially communal water troughs. Cozy, right? Stepping outside, you're instantly enveloped in the vibrant chaos of the city. London's streets are like arteries, throbbing with life yet clogged with muck. The roads, if you can call them that, are more like muddy trenches, and the only thing more ubiquitous than the mud is the stench of animal dung. Horses and oxen are the ubers of the day, and they leave behind a less than pleasant calling card. The markets, though, are where the action is. Imagine a medieval shopping mall, minus the air conditioning, and with a lot more haggling. From sunrise, stalls are brimming with everything from fresh fish hauled from the Thames to spices that have travelled across continents. You could snag a pound of bread for about a penny, which is a decent deal if you're not too picky about the occasional bit of grit. But the stars of the show are the spices. Saffron, pepper and cloves, worth their weight in gold and traded like medieval Bitcoin. If you're feeling particularly flush, you might splash out on some ginger for about 3 shillings a pound. Not exactly a bargain. But then again, your medieval diet could use some excitement. Let's not romanticize this bustling hub too much, though. For every merchant selling fine silks from the East, there's a poor soul hawking eel pies or struggling to sell a few measly vegetables. The economic divide is as stark as the aroma of the fish market. You've got the wealthy merchants and landowners living it up in stone houses with glazed windows, a luxury that screams, "I've made it," while the majority of Londoners cram into timber-framed tenements that are one suspicious spark away from a barbecue. And let's talk about those tenements for a second. They're not just homes, they're incubators of disease. With the population density of a sardine tin and sanitation that's, well, medieval, it's little wonder that London becomes a frequent playground for the Black Death. Not exactly the kind of visitor you want, but it's a grim reality for the time. Navigating the city is like playing a game of medieval Frogger. The streets are a mishmash of pedestrians, carts, animals, and the occasional pickpocket. You might want to keep your purse close. Cut purses are the bane of the medieval commuter. And while you're dodging the filth and keeping an eye on your belongings. You can't help but notice the jarring contrasts of wealth. On one hand, there are the guild halls, symbols of the rising power of trade. On the other, the beggars and destitute crowding the church steps, hoping for a morsel of charity. Social stratification is everywhere, even in the city's architecture. The rich and powerful live near the heart of the city, close to trade routes and fortifications. Meanwhile, the poor are pushed to the outskirts, the edge of society both literally and metaphorically. It's a city divided by wealth, status, and opportunity, a reflection of a broader feudal society where your birth often dictates your destiny. As the morning stretches on and the sun climbs higher, the streets grow even busier. Merchants and traders shout over each other, each trying to hawk their wares louder than the next. There's a vibrancy to it, a sense of life and energy that's infectious, even if it's a bit overwhelming. You might find yourself caught up in the pace, swept along by the crowd, your senses bombarded by the sights, sounds, and smells of a city in full swing. It's easy to romanticize this vibrant marketplace, to imagine it as a quaint, bustling hub of trade and community. But beneath the surface, it's a place of sharp elbows and shrewd deals, where the competition is fierce and survival is a daily grind. For every successful merchant striking it rich, there are dozens more just trying to scrape by, their lives a constant hustle to make ends meet. And yet, despite the hardships and the chaos, there's also a sense of resilience, a determination to carve out a life in this sprawling, messy metropolis. It's a place of opportunity and struggle, where fortunes can change in an instant, and where the only certainty is the unpredictability of life itself. Welcome to medieval London, where your day is just beginning, and the adventure is only just getting started. As the day unfolds, the streets of medieval London become a theatre of chaos, a captivating spectacle of human ingenuity and folly. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of living in this urban behemoth, where every step is a dance with disaster and delight. First, let's talk about sanitation, or more accurately, the glaring absence of it. You see, the medieval Londoner's relationship with waste was, shall we say, casual. Chamber parts were emptied out of windows with a carefree shout of "Gardez-le," a charming French import warning below to watch out. Those who ignored the call ended up with a very unwelcome morning surprise. Now, let's not pretend this was the quaint, charming quirk of a bygone era. This was a public health nightmare waiting to happen. By the 14th century, London was bursting at the seams, home to over 80,000 souls crammed into a space that would make a sardine tin look roomy. The lack of proper sewage systems meant that the streets were rivers of filth, and the Thames, the city's lifeline, was a floating cesspool. Imagine trying to conduct business or enjoy a stroll along what should be a scenic riverbank, only to be assaulted by the stench of raw sewage and decaying offal. It's a wonder anyone kept their lunch down. But let's not get too hung up on hygiene. There's plenty more to boggle the modern mind. Take transportation, for instance. If you thought traffic today was bad, medieval London would make you weep. With streets as narrow as the debate over pineapple on pizza, navigating the city was an exercise in patience and agility. Horses and carts were the Uber and Lyft of the day, but with none of the convenience and all of the road rage. Picture cobblestone paths slick with rain and muck, and you'll start to appreciate the calm chaos of rush hour in your city. And if you were wealthy enough to own a horse, you had better be prepared to deal with the aftermath they left behind. Spoiler, it wasn't pretty. Now, let's turn our gaze upwards to the skyline of medieval London, a hodgepodge of timber-framed houses stacked like precarious Jenga towers. These homes were practical, cheap and quick to build, yet they were essentially fire hazards masquerading as residences. One careless spark, and you could find yourself homeless faster than you can say, "Great Fire of London." And let's not forget the charming addition of thatched roofs, which added a rustic flair and a whole new dimension of flammability. It was a miracle the city didn't burn down every other Tuesday. While the architecture might sound picturesque, this medieval mishmash was less about aesthetics and more about cramming as many people as possible into a limited space. The result, a claustrophobic jumble of buildings that blocked out sunlight and trapped the stench of the streets below. And speaking of smells, let's address the great stink of the Thames, a phenomenon so infamous it deserves its own dubious award. By the time summer rolled around, the river's odorous assault was legendary. Imagine a cocktail of human waste, animal carcasses, and industrial runoff simmering under the hot sun. It was less a river and more a pungent punch in the face. The great stink wasn't just an olfactory offense. It was a catalyst for change. Health issues soared, and commerce suffered as merchants struggled to convince buyers to brave the fetid air. The city's leaders, finally fed up with the endless complaints and declining trade, began to consider the radical idea of cleaning up the Thames. Revolutionary, right? It took well into the 19th century for significant reforms, but the seeds were planted in these dark times of medieval funk. In the midst of this urban jungle, the contrast between rich and poor was as stark as ever. The wealthy could afford to escape the city's stench, retreating to country estates, while the rest of London's denizens were left to navigate the filth and chaos. It was a time where your social standing could dictate whether you lived in a house with glazed windows or a hovel with a leaky roof. The rich had the luxury of privacy and space, while the poor lived cheek by jowl, sharing walls, floors, and occasionally plagues. But let's not paint too bleak a picture. There was a certain resilience to the people of medieval London, an ability to thrive in spite of their circumstances. The city was a bustling hub of trade and opportunity, a place where fortunes could be made and lost in the blink of an eye. It was a world of sharp elbows and sharper wits, where survival required a certain level of cunning and charm. As the afternoon creeps in, the streets are a cacophony of life, a symphony of haggling merchants, clattering hooves, and the ever-present hum of humanity. It's a vibrant, messy tapestry of existence, a testament to the enduring spirit of a city that continues to evolve and adapt. So, while you might not last a day in medieval London without a stiff drink and a nose peg, there's no denying the city's rough-edged allure and the indomitable spirit of its people. And just like that, the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. The scent of roasting meets wafts from taverns, mingling with the ever-present odor of street life. It's a city on the cusp of change, a place where history is being written in the dirt and grime of everyday life. As the day winds down, you can't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for this wild, chaotic metropolis. Welcome to the medieval world, where the adventure never truly ends, and the story, much like the city itself, is just getting started. As the sun dips lower, casting its golden glow over the teeming streets of medieval London, your stomach reminds you it's time for a midday meal. Now, if you're picturing a grand feast with knights in shining armor, think again. Your medieval meal is more likely to be a lesson in the art of making do with what's available, and spoiler alert, it's a far cry from the Instagram-worthy brunches we know today. Let's start with the bread, the cornerstone of the medieval diet. But don't expect a fluffy baguette or a crusty sourdough. We're talking about a dense, chewy loaf made from barley or rye, and if you're lucky, wheat. This was the era's equivalent of a grab-and-go snack, and it was so central to the diet that the medieval mind didn't consider it a meal unless bread was involved. In fact, the quality of your bread was a direct reflection of your social status. Finer, wider bread was the domain of the affluent, while the common folk made do with coarser fare. But don't let that fool you into thinking the medieval table was a bland affair. Far from it. Thanks to the bustling trade routes, even the average Londoner had access to an impressive array of spices. Pepper from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, and saffron from the Arab world transformed the simplest dishes into culinary adventures. These spices were the medieval equivalent of today's gourmet truffle oil, prized, pricey, and a surefire way to flaunt your wealth if you could afford them. Now, let's debunk one of the more stubborn myths about medieval cuisine, the notion that they ate rotten meat disguised with spices. Not true, my friend. While food preservation wasn't exactly a medieval strong suit, the idea of intentionally eating spoiled meat is more fantasy than fact. Spices were used primarily for flavor and sometimes medicinal purposes. And while it's true that without refrigeration, fresh meat was a luxury, medieval folks were pretty savvy with their preservation techniques. Smoking, salting, and drying were common methods to prolong the life of their protein. Speaking of protein, if you're expecting a platter of juicy steaks, think again. Beef was a rarity for most, reserved for the wealthier echelons of society. Instead, your average Joe, or John, as it might have been, would more likely dine on mutton, pork, or poultry. Fish, especially herring, was the Gouda for many, particularly on Fridays. and during religious fasts when meat was off the menu. For those keeping score, the medieval calendar was peppered with over 150 fasting days. That's a lot of fish suppers. But let's get to the heart of what makes a meal more than just food, the social significance. In medieval London, dining was as much about community and hierarchy as it was about sustenance. Feasts were grand affairs where the rich flaunted their wealth and connections, while the poor made do with whatever they could scrounge together. Dining wasn't just an exercise in eating. It was an opportunity to showcase status and forge alliances. Picture the great hall of a wealthy merchant's home, or better yet, the banqueting room of a noble's castle, where tables groaned under the weight of exotic dishes, and the air buzzed with the latest gossip and political machinations. But while the rich feasted, the poor often faced food scarcity. Agricultural economy was at the mercy of the seasons and the weather, and a poor harvest could spell disaster. Grain prices could skyrocket, and in a society where bread was life, this was nothing short of catastrophic. In bad years, famine was a very real threat, and the Black Death of the 14th century only exacerbated the problem, wiping out laborers and leaving fields untended. Feasting and fasting were two sides of the same coin, a reflection of the stark social divide. While the wealthy could use a lavish feast to cement their status, the poor were often forced to rely on charity or the gleanings from fields. It was a world where your meal, or lack thereof, spoke volumes about your place in society. The communal aspects of dining also meant that meals were a public affair, with shared dishes and communal bowls that reinforced social bonds, but also spread disease at an alarming rate. So, as you take a bite of your medieval lunch, remember, every mouthful is a taste of history, a reflection of the social and economic forces that shaped life in medieval London. It's a reminder that even in the most mundane acts like eating, the currents of power and status are never far away. As you digest this midday insight, the bustling streets beckon once more, promising more tales of a city defined by its contradictions and complexities. Stay tuned, because the story of medieval London is far from finished, and the afternoon holds its own adventures yet to unfold. As you finish your midday meal, wiping crumbs from your tunic, the bustling city continues to teem with life, drawing you into the gritty reality of medieval justice, a system that makes modern-day legal dramas look like children's theater. You might think of a medieval courtroom as a scene straight out of a Monty Python sketch, but the stakes here are no laughing matter. Welcome to the wild world of medieval justice and governance, where the sheriff isn't just some guy in a cowboy hat, but a key figure in maintaining order amidst the chaos. Let's start with the sheriff, a title that evokes images of John Wayne swaggering through a saloon. In medieval London, however, the sheriff was more about scrolls and less about shootouts. These guys were the king's men, responsible for collecting taxes and making sure the law was upheld. Think of them as the IRS meets the FBI with a dash of medieval flair. And if you think tax season is bad now, try dealing with it in a time when records were kept on parchment, not in spreadsheets. The sheriff's duties didn't end with taxes. They were also instrumental in maintaining the king's peace, a task as Herculean as it sounds. In a city where disputes could erupt over everything from land to livestock, the sheriff was essentially the referee, trying to keep things from descending into an all-out brawl. And speaking of brawls, let's talk about those infamous trials by ordeal, a legal system that makes you question if medieval folks had a collective death wish. Trial by ordeal was the medieval equivalent of a game show, but instead of winning a car, you were trying not to lose your life. If accused of a crime, you might be subjected to ordeal by water or ordeal by fire. For the former, you'd be bound and tossed into a river. If you floated, you were guilty because the water rejected you. If you sank, congratulations, you were innocent. But let's face it, you probably weren't around to hear the verdict. Ordeal by fire was equally fun. You'd have to hold a red-hot iron bar, and if your wounds healed nicely, you were off the hook. Spoiler, wounds rarely healed nicely. These trials were less about justice and more about divine intervention. The belief was that God would protect the innocent, but given the survival rates, it's safe to say that luck, not divine favor, was the real decider. The whole ordeal, pun intended, was more about spectacle than fairness, a grim reminder of the times when the line between divine will and human folly was as blurry as a medieval map. Now, let's delve into the political arena. the medieval Game of Thrones that makes the HBO series look like a friendly game of chess. The monarchy wielded power like a double-edged sword, constantly maneuvering to maintain control over a patchwork of feudal lords, each with their own ambitions and armies. The king was the ultimate authority, but keeping the nobles in line was a delicate balancing act, akin to herding cats while juggling flaming torches. One way the crown maintained power was through the feudal system, a hierarchical structure where loyalty was the currency of the realm. In exchange for land and protection, lords pledged allegiance to the king. This web of loyalties was as tangled as a medieval maiden's hair, and any hint of betrayal could set off a chain reaction of intrigue and rebellion. The monarchy's control was never absolute, constantly challenged by ambitious nobles eager to expand their influence. It's no wonder that the medieval period was rife with coups, plots, and power struggles. For the average Londoner, the political machinations of the nobility felt as distant as a dragon's roar from a fairy tale. But the ripple effects were palpable. Taxes flowed uphill to fund royal coffers, and decrees from the monarch could affect everything from trade to personal freedoms. Navigating this landscape required a keen understanding of the law, which, much like today, was a labyrinthine beast. Taxes were the bane of every medieval Londoner's existence. The crown's insatiable need for funds meant that almost anything could be taxed. Wool, land, even the very air you breathed seemed up for grabs. The infamous poll tax of 1381 sparked the peasants' revolt, a bloody uprising that put the king on notice. It turns out, there's only so much squeezing you can do before the grapes start to fight back. And yet, despite the heavy burden of taxes and the capriciousness of the law, there was a certain resilience in the London spirit. The city was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and languages, where opportunity and danger walked hand in hand. Londoners knew how to work the system, bending rules when they could, and finding loopholes in the labyrinthine legal code. It was a city where survival depended on wits as much as wealth. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows over the city, the streets thrum with the pulse of commerce and conflict. The sound of hammers rings out from the blacksmith's forge, while merchants haggle over the price of spices and fabrics. It's a symphony of industry and ambition, played out against a backdrop of political intrigue and social upheaval. Even as the city's rulers grapple with power and control, the people of medieval London carve out their own destinies, navigating a world where justice is as unpredictable as the weather. It's a place where every transaction, every handshake, and every whispered conversation holds the potential to change fortunes and shape the future. So, as you stroll through the bustling streets, take a moment to appreciate the complex tapestry of life in medieval London. It's a world of contrasts and contradictions, where the past and future collide in a dance of history and humanity. The story of this vibrant, chaotic city is far from over, with more twists and turns waiting just around the corner. Stay tuned, because the adventure is only beginning, and who knows what the next act will bring. As the day in medieval London winds down, you might feel the urge to unwind, to find some escape from the formidable chaos of your surroundings. And we're better than the bustling hubs of entertainment that pepper the city. London's got a flair for theatrics, literally. Mystery plays, the Netflix of the medieval era, are all the rage. These performances, often staged in churchyards or market squares, dramatize biblical tales with a flair that would put modern soap operas to shame. Imagine entire townsfolk gathering to watch the story of Adam and Eve unfold, complete with medieval special effects like trapdoors and smoke. Think of it as the CGI of the 14th century. But while mystery plays offer a communal blend of education and entertainment, they're not the only show in town. For those with a taste for more visceral thrills, bear baiting is your ticket. Yes, you heard that right, bear baiting. Picture a bear chained in a pit, set upon by dogs, while spectators cheer on the carnage. It's as gruesome as it sounds, a stark reminder that entertainment often walked hand in hand with brutality. It was a testament to the raw, unfiltered nature of medieval pastimes, where the line between sport and savagery was as thin as a lute string. Yet for all its harshness, medieval entertainment was a crucial escape valve for a populace burdened by the era's relentless grind. The tension of daily survival found release in the boisterous atmosphere of alehouses. These taverns were the social media of their day, buzzing with gossip, business deals, and the occasional brawl. Ale was the go-to beverage, safer than the city's water, and a penny could get you a pint to nurse while you soaked in the latest news or tried your luck in a game of dice. And then there's the ever-present church. If you're imagining a serene place of spiritual solace, prepare for a revelation. The church in medieval London was both a haven and a hammer. Dominating the skyline with structures like St. Paul's Cathedral, it was impossible to ignore. Beyond spiritual guidance, the church wielded significant power, often acting as the de facto government. Canon law mingled with secular law, giving the clergy a say in everything from marriage to moral conduct, and tithes were a mandatory tax, 1/10 of your produce or income, feeding the ecclesiastical beast. But the church also provided charity, education, and a sense of community. Monasteries served as the medieval safety net, offering alms to the poor and care for the sick, albeit with strings attached. Religious festivals were the social events of the year, a blend of sacred and profane where piety met revelry. It was a delicate dance between devotion and indulgence, a reminder that faith in medieval London wasn't just a private affair, but a public spectacle. As you wander through the dimming streets, the echoes of vespers mingling with the distant roar of merriment, it becomes strikingly clear why one day in this city is plenty to appreciate the comforts of modern life. Sure, we might romanticize the medieval era with its knights and castles, but the reality, it's a bit like finding out your favorite movie was shot entirely on a green screen. The allure is there, but so is the artifice. Modern conveniences like clean water, reliable healthcare, and a legal system that doesn't involve river dunking are luxuries forged from centuries of trial and error. The resilience and resourcefulness of medieval Londoners laid the foundation for a city that would survive plagues, fires, and revolts. They built a legacy of endurance, crafting a metropolis that, despite its past follies, would grow into a global hub of culture and commerce. So, as the sun dips below the horizon, and the city settles into its nocturnal rhythm, take a moment to reflect on the journey through the medieval maze. It's a testament to human ingenuity and folly, a reminder of the indomitable spirit that drives people to create, endure, and thrive, even in the grimmest of circumstances. Welcome to history's great stage, where every era has its own quirks and challenges, and every person plays a part in the unfolding drama of time. In the end, medieval London isn't just a city of mud and shadows. It's a vibrant tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of triumph and tragedy. It's a place where the past speaks to the present, whispering tales of a world both foreign and familiar. And as you step back into your own time, perhaps you'll carry with you a new appreciation for the comforts of the modern age, and a deeper understanding of the roots from which they sprang. Somewhere between the chaos of Game of Thrones and the strategy of a chess grandmaster's fever dream lies the Warring States period of ancient China. It's a time when warlords and states battled for supremacy with the dedication of a reality TV show contestant vying for a rose. Amidst this backdrop of shifting allegiances and opportunistic betrayals emerges Sun Tzu, the enigmatic sage often credited with crafting the art of war. Now, Sun Tzu, or Sunzi, if you're feeling historically authentic, wasn't just some dude laying out tips for your local paintball league. His manual on strategy has been guiding leaders, both military and corporate, for over 2 millennia. But before we get lost in the sage advice of never interrupting your enemy when he's making a mistake, let's set the stage and unravel the tangled mess that was 5th century BC China. First, let's talk geography. China during this period wasn't the unified behemoth we know today. Instead, picture a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that refuse to fit. We're talking about 7 major states: Qin, Chu, Kai, Yan, Han, Wei, and Zhao, each with their own royal ambitions and a penchant for conflict that would make even the most ardent fans of drama blush. These states were constantly at each other's throats, alliances and rivalries forming and dissolving faster than viral TikTok dances. In fact, from around 475 BC to 221 BC, the Warring States period saw more backstabbing than a Shakespearean tragedy, with plenty of real-life casualties to boot. Economics played a key role here. As these states jockeyed for power, they also sought control over resources like fertile land, water, and the ever-important manpower. There was a kind of brutal logic to it all. conquer more territory, gain more resources, and field a bigger army. It was a vicious cycle, but hey, nobody said becoming top dog was easy. While armies clashed, the states themselves were undergoing profound changes. Iron replaced bronze, and new agricultural techniques spread like wildfire, feeding ever-growing populations. It was a time of innovation driven by necessity, because if you couldn't feed your people, well, they might just feed you to the wolves or the enemy. Now, while the political landscape resembled a particularly aggressive game of Risk, the social fabric was woven with Confucian ideals and Taoist philosophies, both attempting to make sense of the chaos. Here enters Sun Tzu, allegedly a general from the state of Kai, who seems to have had enough of the haphazard way wars were waged. Though some skeptics argue Sun Tzu might be more mythical than man. Like King Arthur with a sword-shaped pen, the text attributed to him offers insights that feel timeless. It's a blend of psychological warfare, tactical genius, and a bit of common sense wrapped in poetic prose. For instance, the idea of winning without fighting might sound like a Zen koan, but it's actually a strategic masterstroke. Why risk your neck when intimidation will do the trick? Historians still debate the exact origins of the art of war, with some suggesting it may have been compiled over several generations rather than authored by a single figure. But whether Sun Tzu was a real person or a collective of strategists, the world has been captivated by his teachings ever since. The text's influence began at home, spreading across the states like the ancient equivalent of going viral. Leaders who followed its principles often found themselves with the upper hand, while those who didn't, well, let's just say history isn't written by the losers. The political chaos of the warring states was like a pressure cooker, with constant warfare acting as the heat. This environment demanded leaders who could think several moves ahead, and the art of war provided the blueprint. Its principles emphasized flexibility, deception, and the importance of understanding both your enemy and yourself. Sun Tzu's wisdom transcended the battlefield, eventually seeping into every crevice of Chinese society, from governance to personal conduct. So, what does all this mean for us, sitting comfortably in the present day, with our smartphones and streaming services? It means that despite the centuries that separate us, the fundamental nature of conflict and strategy hasn't changed all that much. In a world where our battles are often fought in boardrooms rather than blood-soaked fields, Sun Tzu's insights remain eerily relevant. The Warring States period was a crucible forging ideas that have survived the test of time. And as we delve deeper into this story, we'll see just how absurd, brutal, and oddly familiar this ancient world can be. But for now, let's raise a metaphorical glass to Sun Tzu, the master strategist whose words continue to echo through the ages, reminding us that sometimes the best way to win is to not fight at all. From ancient battlefields to boardrooms, the allure of Sun Tzu's The Art of War lies in its ability to morph from sage military guide to a corporate strategy manifesto without breaking a sweat. But let's not get too misty-eyed about Sun Tzu as a solitary genius scribbling away in a bamboo grove. The truth is, Sun Tzu didn't spring from the earth fully formed, clutching a quill and scroll. He was the product of a rich tapestry of military tradition and collective knowledge that had been brewing like a particularly potent batch of Beiju for centuries. The idea that Sun Tzu was some lone wolf strategist is about as plausible as your average Hollywood superhero origin story. Sure, the narrative is appealing, one man against the chaos, but ancient China wasn't short on brilliant minds and fierce warriors. The Warring States period was a veritable think tank of military innovation, and any general worth his salt knew that warfare was as much about cunning as it was about sheer force. Take the Qin state, for instance. They were like the Silicon Valley of military development, pioneering new ways to field and equip armies that would eventually lead them to unify China under the Qin dynasty in 221 BC. This was an era when crossbows were the drones of the day, and mass infantry formations were the ancient equivalent of dropping the mic. Let's zoom in on some of Sun Tzu's greatest hits, shall we? Consider the concept of winning without fighting, a strategy that's as elegant as it is elusive. In today's world, this could mean negotiating a business deal so skillfully that your competitors back off without a struggle, preserving your resources and your sanity. It's a bit like convincing your roommate to do the dishes without lifting a finger, pure magic if you can pull it off. Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception and surprise is another classic move. The idea is simple: keep your opponent guessing. In the corporate sphere, this might translate to launching a new product with ninja-like stealth, taking your competitors by surprise while they're busy polishing their old wares. Now, let's talk teamwork. While the myth paints Sun Tzu as a lone genius, the reality is that he stood on the shoulders of giants. Military treatises and strategic thinking had been developing for centuries, with contributions from countless unnamed strategists. Sun Tzu distilled these ideas into a coherent guide, but he wasn't operating in a vacuum. It's like crediting Steve Jobs alone for the iPhone, forgetting the army of engineers and designers who turned vision into reality. The Art of War is less a solo masterpiece and more a greatest hits album of ancient wisdom. Among the most quoted lines from the text is the mantra, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles without disaster." This is not just strategy, it's survival psychology. In today's parlance, it's the ultimate market research. Know your competitors, know your capabilities, and you won't just survive, you'll thrive. But let's be real. Who among us hasn't walked into a meeting, armed with spreadsheets and a false sense of confidence, only to realize we didn't actually know the terrain? Sun Tzu would have shaken his head at such folly. While Sun Tzu's work has been romanticized over millennia, it's important to remember the gritty realities of its time. Warfare was brutal and unromantic, a clash of iron, blood, and wits. Troops marched long distances on foot, with the logistics of feeding and equipping them turning into a massive exercise in resource management. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about sustaining armies, maintaining morale, and ensuring that when the dust settled, there was still a state left to govern. It's the kind of pressure that makes today's quarterly earnings reports look like a stroll in the park. And speaking of pressure, the economic context of the warring states period can't be overstated. States fought over resources like arable land and water, with the spoils of war often determining a state's survival. The economics of war was a zero-sum game, and states that failed to adapt to new agricultural techniques or improve their military technology quickly found themselves on the chopping block. It's a bit like the modern corporate landscape, where innovation isn't just a goal, it's a necessity. So, when we talk about the art of war, we're really diving into a text that is less about war and more about strategy in every sense of the word. The principles laid out by Sun Tzu are as applicable to the cutthroat world of business as they are to the battlefield. Whether you're outmaneuvering a rival company or navigating office politics, the core tenets remain eerily relevant. Flexibility, deception, and understanding your opponent are not just strategies, they're survival tools. Yet, for all its wisdom, it would be misleading to treat the art of war as a one-size-fits-all manual. The text is open to interpretation, and its vagueness is part of its genius. It encourages adaptability, urging leaders to mold the principles to fit their unique circumstances. This adaptability is precisely why Sun Tzu's work has endured, morphing from a military guide to a business blueprint, and even a philosophical treatise on human nature. But let's not kid ourselves. Life isn't always a chessboard, and real-world application of these strategies can be as challenging as they are rewarding. Sun Tzu's emphasis on flexibility means there's no magic formula, no guarantee that following the script will lead to success. It's about making the best decision with the information at hand, a skill that remains as elusive as it is essential. As we continue to delve into the intricacies of the art of war, we'll explore more of these timeless strategies and how they resonate in today's world, where the battlefields may have changed, but the stakes remain just as high. The journey through Sun Tzu's world is far from over, and as we navigate this ancient landscape, we'll see just how these age-old strategies continue to shape our modern realities. Stay tuned for more tales of cunning, courage, and the relentless pursuit of victory as we continue our deep dive into the gritty realities behind the romanticized veneer of ancient Chinese warfare. Let's confront a truth that's as illuminating as it is brutal. The economic underpinnings of war in ancient China were a logistical nightmare that would make even the most seasoned project manager break out in a cold sweat. Forget about the gallant warrior poets galloping into battle with poetic flair. This was about as glamorous as a spreadsheet detailing your household budget. First up, let's talk about feeding an army. Picture this, tens of thousands of soldiers all marching in sync not just for days or weeks, but often for months on end. It's like planning a never-ending road trip with a battalion of hangry teenagers. The logistics of keeping these troops fed and watered were staggering. On average, a single soldier required about 2 pounds of grain per day, not to mention the additional need for meat, vegetables, and water. Multiply that by an army of 50, 000, and you've got a daily grocery bill that could make even the wealthiest state treasurers lose sleep. But wait, it gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. The infrastructure to support these massive undertakings was about as robust as a paper mache bridge. Roads were often little more than dirt tracks, and supply lines could stretch over hundreds of miles. Imagine trying to get your Amazon Prime delivery in the middle of a war zone, only your parcel is a few thousand bags of rice. The logistics officers of the time didn't rely on delivery drones, but on slow-moving ox carts and overburdened porters trudging through unforgiving terrain. And then there's the small matter of cost. Maintaining constant military readiness was akin to having a subscription service that you couldn't cancel. The expense of arming and equipping thousands of soldiers was astronomical. Iron weapons, leather armor, and those nifty crossbows that made ancient Chinese armies the envy of the world didn't come cheap. The price of a single crossbow, for instance, could rival the annual income of a small village. And while those crossbows were revolutionary, think of them as the smartphones of their day. Their upkeep was a continuous drain on resources. Let's debunk a romantic notion while we're at it. The idea of the noble warrior fighting for honor and glory. In reality, most soldiers were conscripts, peasants yanked from their fields and thrust into the chaos of battle. These men were often poorly trained and ill-equipped, with the life expectancy of a snowflake in a furnace. The romanticized image of the brave warrior was often just that, an image. For every knight in shining armor, there were countless foot soldiers slogging through mud, driven by duty and the very real fear of punishment. Now, you might wonder why anyone bothered with war at all, given these overwhelming challenges. Well, the answer circles back to economics and power. Control over fertile land, water sources, and trade routes meant survival. The states that could harness and expand these resources through warfare stood a chance of thriving. It was a cutthroat game of Monopoly, where losing meant actual annihilation, not just flipping the board in frustration. Sun Tzu, with his strategic brilliance, wasn't just jarring down philosophical musings in the art of war. He was offering a lifeline. His strategies were deeply rooted in the harsh economic realities of his time. Take his emphasis on the importance of speed and surprise. These weren't just tactics for psychological warfare. They were practical solutions to the crippling costs of prolonged campaigns. A quick victory meant fewer resources expended and a faster return to stability. It's a bit like snatching a win before your opponent even knows the game has started. Moreover, Sun Tzu's insistence on knowing your enemy and yourself wasn't just sage advice. It was a pragmatic approach to minimizing risk and maximizing resources. By understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both sides, leaders could allocate their resources more effectively, avoiding the wasteful blunders that could bankrupt a state. This was less about the art of war and more about the science of not going broke. And let's not ignore the psychological toll on soldiers. The constant threat of death, combined with the grueling conditions, meant that maintaining morale was as crucial as any battle strategy. Sun Tzu recognized this, advocating for leadership that inspired loyalty and tenacity. The idea was simple yet profound. A well-motivated soldier fights harder and smarter. These economic pressures didn't just influence military strategy. They shaped the very fabric of Chinese society. States that failed to adapt and innovate found themselves absorbed or obliterated by more resourceful neighbors. The relentless drive to optimize resources and refine military tactics was a survival mechanism, pushing technological and agricultural advancements that would ripple through history. So, as we peel back the layers of history, we find that the allure of the art of war isn't in its romanticism, but in its raw, unvarnished practicality. This was not just a manual for generals, but a blueprint for survival in a world where the stakes were life and death. The strategies that Sun Tzu laid out were not born from idealism, but from a necessity as cold and calculating as a chess match played for keeps. As we move forward, we'll continue to unravel the complexities of Sun Tzu's world, exploring how these ancient strategies continue to resonate in our modern era. The battlefield may have shifted from the plains of ancient China to boardrooms and beyond, but the lessons remain as pertinent as ever. Stay tuned for more insights into this fascinating intersection of history, strategy, and human nature, where the past and present collide in ways both familiar and unexpected. With Sun Tzu's strategic wisdom echoing through the corridors of time, let's fast forward to some of the key historical figures who couldn't resist dipping into the art of war like it was the ultimate cheat code for conquest. From the blood-soaked battlefields of the past to modern boardrooms, Sun Tzu's words have been wielded by leaders seeking an edge sharper than a samurai's katana. Take Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance. The pint-sized powerhouse of strategy allegedly had a translation of Sun Tzu shoved somewhere between his military maps and ego. Now, whether he actually read it, or just liked the idea of being associated with such strategic clout, is up for debate. But considering Napoleon's knack for tactical brilliance, until he didn't, let's not forget his Russian blunder. It's not hard to imagine him nodding along to ideas like all warfare is based on deception, while plotting his next move over a croissant. Jumping across the pond, we find George Washington, the father of the United States, who was known to have a copy of Sun Tzu's treatise in his library. While he was busy crossing the Delaware and dodging British bullets, it's comforting to think he might have drawn on Sun Tzu's advice for a little strategic inspo. After all, Sun Tzu's emphasis on knowing oneself and the enemy would have been music to Washington's ears as he navigated the complexities of guerrilla warfare against a far more formidable foe. But let's not pretend that the allure of Sun Tzu's wisdom was limited to military titans alone. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and you'll find his sage advice being co-opted by everyone from corporate titans to self-help gurus. The metamorphosis of the art of war, from battlefield Bible to boardroom Bible, is a testament to its adaptability, and perhaps a touch of opportunism by those looking to add a dash of ancient wisdom to their hustle. Now, the idea of CEOs leafing through the art of war, as if it were the holy grail of business strategy, does tickle the funny bone. Picture a top executive strutting into a meeting, Sun Tzu in one hand and a double espresso in the other, ready to unleash psychological warfare on the unsuspecting competition. It's almost comical, except for the fact that many of these principles actually work, proving that the cutthroat world of business isn't all that different from the battlefields of old. Of course, with great power comes great misinterpretation. The self-help industry has latched onto the art of war with the zeal of a motivational speaker at a positivity summit. You can't swing a cat without hitting someone who's using Sun Tzu's wisdom to justify everything from dieting strategies to relationship advice. Winning without fighting sounds great until you're trying to convince your toddler to eat broccoli without a full-scale meltdown. But hey, if Sun Tzu can help you navigate the office potluck or a PTA meeting unscathed, who am I to judge? What's fascinating is how this ancient text has been adapted, quoted, and sometimes outright mangled to fit modern contexts. It's like an eternal game of telephone, with each retelling adding a layer of interpretation or misinterpretation. The phrase, appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend, might have originally been about military maneuvers, but today it could just as easily be about strategic marketing or where to open your next coffee shop. Despite the sometimes comedic overuse of Sun Tzu's teachings, there's no denying their fundamental brilliance. His insights into human nature and conflict are as relevant today as they were 500 years ago. It's a testament to the universality of his ideas that they've transcended the realm of war to become a staple in business schools, leadership seminars, and yes, even the odd self-help book. But let's not get carried away with the romantic notion of Sun Tzu as the ultimate life coach. The reality is, the art of war is a product of its time, deeply rooted in the brutal realities of ancient Chinese warfare. It's easy to forget that behind the poetic prose and strategic pearls of wisdom lies a text born from necessity, designed to navigate a world where survival hung by a thread, and every decision carried the weight of life or death. So, as we continue to unravel the legacy of the art of war, Let's keep our eyes peeled for both the myth and the reality. We'll explore more stories of leaders who drew on Sun Tzu's teachings and those who perhaps took his advice a little too literally. The journey through Sun Tzu's world is far from over, and as we delve deeper, we'll uncover more of the timeless strategies that continue to shape our modern realities. Who knows, maybe we'll even find a few tips for surviving the next office meeting or holiday dinner. Stay tuned for more tales of cunning, courage, and the relentless pursuit of victory through the ages. As we navigate the legacy of the art of war, it's time to address the elephant in the room, or perhaps the dragon in the bamboo grove. How on earth did an ancient Chinese text about warfare become the darling of MBA programs and inspirational quote posters? The answer is as layered as a millefeuille, with a dollop of myth and a sprinkle of modern reinterpretation. Let's start with the timelessness of Sun Tzu's insights. His strategies are built on principles of human nature that have remained as constant as gravity. The idea of leveraging strength against weakness, for example, is as applicable in a boardroom merger as it was on the battlefield. Sun Tzu's emphasis on adaptability means his work isn't just a dusty relic. It's a living document. It's like the Swiss Army knife of strategic thinking, handy in almost any scenario. But let's not pretend that Sun Tzu's teachings are some kind of secret sauce, exclusive to military geniuses and corporate CEOs. Ubiquity of the art of war in modern education is a testament to its versatility. It's been distilled into countless curricula, from military academies like West Point to business schools at Harvard. These institutions aren't just teaching tactics, they're imparting a mindset, a way to approach problems with a strategic lens. Now, about those myths. The idea of Sun Tzu as a lone, wise sage is undeniably appealing. It paints a picture of a solitary thinker, perhaps under a willow tree, penning his thoughts while the world around him descends into chaos. But history is rarely so romantic. The text is likely a compilation of wisdom from various strategists, reflecting centuries of military evolution. It's like crediting the invention of the internet to a single person. It misses the point entirely. The mythologizing of Sun Tzu serves a purpose, though. It simplifies a complex history into a digestible narrative, much like how a good story can make abstract concepts relatable. This mythic status also adds a layer of authority, making it easier to sell books and seminars. After all, who wouldn't want to quote a legendary figure in their next PowerPoint presentation? Speaking of which, imagine Sun Tzu himself in a modern corporate strategy meeting. Picture him, clad not in ancient armor, but in a tailored suit, listening to a CEO quote his work while discussing market penetration. I suspect he'd be both amused and bemused, perhaps offering a wry smile as his words are twisted to fit quarterly targets and profit margins. Ah, he might think, so this is how my thoughts on siege warfare have become advice for climbing the corporate ladder. The endurance of the art of war lies in its chameleon-like ability to adapt to new contexts. It's not just about war. It's about understanding conflict, competition, and the human psyche. It's a guide to thriving in environments where stakes are high and the rules are always changing. And let's face it, that describes both ancient battlefields and modern-day boardrooms pretty well. Yet, for all its adaptability, the text remains rooted in its original context. It's easy to forget that the strategies were born from a world where lives were on the line, where decisions made the difference between victory and annihilation. We can romanticize Sun Tzu's words all we want, but the reality is that they emerged from a brutal necessity, a world where warfare wasn't a metaphor, but a bloody reality. In conclusion, the legacy of the art of war is a testament to the enduring nature of strategic thought. Sun Tzu's teachings have traveled far from their origins, morphing into a universal guide for navigating challenges. They remind us that while tactics may change, the essence of strategy remains the same. Whether you're a general, a CEO, or just trying to outwit your chess opponent, the principles of adaptability, deception, and understanding remain as crucial as ever. As we sign off on this journey through ancient strategy and its modern echoes, take a moment to appreciate the strange, wonderful journey of Sun Tzu's wisdom. From the battlefields of ancient China to the fluorescent-lit conference rooms of today, his insights continue to resonate, shaping decisions and inspiring new generations of thinkers. So, The next time you find yourself quoting The Art of War at a meeting or pondering its wisdom in a quiet moment, remember that you're part of a long, storied tradition of strategy. A tradition that, like Sun Tzu himself, endures against all odds. So, you're an Aztec warrior in training. Not just any kid running around Tenochtitlan, mind you. You're on the path to become a muscle-bound, eagle-helmet-wearing, obsidian club-wielding force of nature. But before you start flexing in a feathered cloak, let's rewind a bit. You're a scrappy young lad, at the ripe age of 15, just entering one of the two schools of life that'll shape your destiny, the Karmakak or the Tulpachkeli. Both names sound like tongue twisters, but trust me, they mean business. The Karmakak is where the noble-born head to brush up on the finer things in life, like astrology, philosophy, and oh yes, the art of war. Forget about getting lost in the stars with your astrology app. Here, you're learning how celestial movements dictate the best time to, well, conquer someone. Meanwhile, the Tulpachkeli is the gritty boot camp for commoners. Think less ivory tower, more hands-on, with a side of, hey kid, welcome to the real world. You're not just learning to wield a macuahuitl, a weapon that's basically a wooden sword with razor-sharp obsidian blades. You're mastering it. Now, let's talk about why you're even bothering with all this warrior business. It's not just about glory or looking cool in jaguar-patterned armor. You see, every swing of your weapon is part of a bigger picture, the Aztec economy. Yeah, those fierce battles are less about personal vendettas and more like a well-organized business plan. Wars meant tribute, and tribute meant wealth. Cities and territories conquered by the Aztecs were expected to pay up in goods like maize, beans, and luxury items. It's all about that bottom line, baby. But let's not pretend it's all spreadsheets and stonemasonry. There's a hefty dose of religious significance in these wars, too. Capturing prisoners wasn't just a tactical win, it was a spiritual necessity. These unlucky captives often ended up as sacrifices, pleasing the gods and keeping the universe from imploding. Talk about having a bad day. Back to you, our budding warrior. Your social class is your ticket to which school you end up in. Are you born with a silver spoon, or are you the street-smart kid from down the block? Nobility. Welcome to the Karmakak, where you'll learn to lead with both your heart and a hefty dose of strategy. Commoner, roll up your sleeves at the Tulpachkeli and prepare to fight like your life, and your family's livelihood depends on it. Spoiler, it does. Training is no walk in the Chinempers. You're up at the crack of dawn, not to scroll through TikTok, but to sweat it out with drills that'd make a modern boot camp look like a yoga retreat. You'll learn to swim in armor, throw a spear with deadly precision, and most importantly, how to take orders. Respect for authority isn't just encouraged, it's enforced with the kind of discipline that would make your average drill sergeant blush. Let's not forget the delightful Aztec diet. Corn tortillas, beans, and the occasional turkey or dog meat if you're lucky. Protein shakes and energy bars. Forget it. You're fueled by the same things that keep the Empire's engines running. Maize and, well, more maize. And if you're really fortunate, a splash of cacao to jazz things up. Now, here's a fun twist. The Aztecs believed that to die in battle was to ascend directly to the heavens. So, while you train, there's this little nugget of comfort knowing that if you meet your maker on the battlefield, you're in for a divine afterlife. Forget the 400 one. K. You've got a heavenly pension plan. The politics behind this martial machine are as intricate as a woven tapestry. The Emperor, or Huey T. Latoni, isn't just a figurehead. He's the ultimate CEO, warlord, and spiritual leader all rolled into one. He decides which cities need a little encouragement to join the Aztec fold. Spoiler alert, it's usually the ones lagging on their tribute payments. But why the obsession with expansion and warfare, you ask? Simple, resources and power. The Aztecs didn't just want to survive, they aimed to thrive, and that meant more land, more resources, and more subjects to keep the Empire's heart beating. Tribute wasn't just a nice perk, it was the lifeblood of the Aztec economy. And you, young warrior, are one cog in this vast, humming machine. So as you train, remember, every bead of sweat, every bruise, every shouted command is part of a grander scheme. You're not just learning to fight, you're learning to uphold a civilization. No pressure, right? And with every successful campaign, you're not just bringing home the bacon, or in this case, the maize. You're reaffirming the power and prestige of your people. In the end, whether you rise to become a decorated jaguar or eagle warrior, or simply fulfill your duty on the battlefield, your journey is essential. You're part of a legacy that, while often brutal and ruthless, is as rich and complex as the vibrant city of Tenochtitlan itself. So, rest up, young warrior. Tomorrow, the drums of war may call again. You'll need every ounce of strength and wit you've got. And speaking of tomorrow, let's dive headfirst into the illustrious world of the eagle and jaguar warriors. You've heard the legends, mighty warriors dressed in feathers and feline pelts, feared and revered across the Aztec Empire. But let's peel back the layers of this mythos and see what's really going on beneath those extravagant costumes. First off, the hierarchy. Not just anyone could claw their way into these elite societies. You had to prove your mettle on the battlefield, capturing not one, not two, but at least 4 enemy warriors alive. Think of it as an ancient version of a video game achievement, only with much higher stakes and no reset button. Once you hit that milestone, congratulations. You've earned the right to join the club, and with it, some serious social and political clout. The Eagle Warriors, or Cuautli, embodied the sun, soaring high with their brilliant plumage, while the Jaguar Warriors, or Axolotl, represented the earth, stalking their prey with stealth and strength. If you thought your Hogwarts house was a big deal, try choosing between these two. The symbolism was potent, making these warriors not just soldiers, but living embodiments of the Aztec cosmology. But before you get too swept up in the romance, let's talk brass tacks. Being part of these prestigious societies came with perks, sure. You got to wear the iconic regalia. Eagle helmets and jaguar skins were the Aztec equivalent of a military uniform crossed with haute couture. But these weren't just for show. The outfits had practical battlefield applications, providing protection and a psychological edge. Ever try fighting a guy who looks like he just stepped out of a myth? Intimidation was half the battle. Now, let's bust a myth or two. You might picture these warriors lounging in grandeur, sipping chocolate from golden cups. Reality check. It wasn't all glory and glam. The daily grind of an eagle or jaguar warrior was intense. Training was relentless, a brutal mix of physical conditioning and tactical drills. Think of it as a cross between a Navy SEAL program and a relentless boot camp, minus the weekends off. On the battlefield, these warriors weren't just about the flash. They were the tip of the Aztec spear, responsible for leading charges, capturing prisoners, and turning the tide of war. But here's where the rubber meets the road, folks. Despite the romantic image of gallant heroes, the reality was gritty and often grim. Battles were brutal, and the price of failure was steep. If you didn't capture prisoners, you risked losing your rank or, worse, your life. Let's zoom out a bit and talk economics, because, surprise, surprise, maintaining these fighters was not cheap. Crafting those elaborate costumes and weapons required significant resources. Feathers weren't just picked off the ground. They were imported from far-flung regions, making them a luxury. And those obsidian blades, they had to be meticulously chipped from volcanic glass, a resource-intensive process. When you add up the costs, these elite warriors were a major investment for the Aztec state. And what about the societal investment? Training a warrior wasn't just about the individual. Entire communities contributed, from the craftsmen who made the gear to the farmers who grew the food. The empire poured resources into these warriors because they were more than just fighters. They were symbols of Aztec power and prestige. Their success on the battlefield was a direct reflection of the empire's strength, and failure wasn't just personal. It was a national humiliation. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason these legends endure. The allure of the eagle and jaguar warriors, with their blend of bravery, skill, and mystique, is hard to resist. They were the rock stars of their day, and who doesn't love a good rock star story? Yet, beneath the feathers and pelts, they were also human, facing the same fears and pressures as any soldier. The romantic veneer might be captivating, but the reality was a high-stakes game of life and death. In the grand tapestry of Aztec society, these warriors were a thread that held everything together. They were a testament to the empire's might, a reminder of its beliefs, and a crucial component of its expansionist agenda. So, while we marvel at their legendary status, it's crucial to remember the sacrifices, literal and figurative, that lay beneath. As we wrap up today's exploration of the military hierarchy and elite warrior societies, keep in mind that we've only scratched the surface. The story of the Aztecs is as rich and complex as the warriors who fought for its glory. And just like them, we have a long way to go. So gear up and stay tuned, because the drums of history are still beating, and there's plenty more to uncover. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Aztec battle tactics, shall we? Imagine you're marching into battle, not as some mythic hero, but as a cog in a meticulously engineered war machine. The Aztecs didn't just throw a bunch of folks together, slap some feathers on them, and hope for the best. They had a system, a complex, strategic, and downright brutal system. First off, let's get into formations. You might think the Aztecs were all about the chaos of melee combat, but you'd be wrong. They had formations to rival any modern military. The key was discipline, and every warrior knew his place in the grand choreography of war. Picture a phalanx with obsidian-bladed macuahuitls glinting in the sun, terrifying yet organized. These guys didn't just charge. They advanced like a tide, overwhelming enemies with sheer coordination. And speaking of the macuahuitl, let's take a closer look at this legendary weapon. Think of it as the Swiss Army knife of Mesoamerican warfare. It was a wooden club embedded with sharp obsidian blades, capable of slicing through armor like butter. Forget about the glint of steel. Obsidian was sharper than any metal, albeit a bit more fragile. You had to swing it just right, or risk turning your sword into a fancy stick. But if you got it right, heads would roll, literally. Military logistics were another marvel. Transporting armies wasn't just a matter of pointing and walking. The Aztecs had a network of roads and causeways stretching like veins across their empire. These highways weren't just for traders. They were the arteries of war. Armies could move swiftly, covering distances that would make a marathon runner break a sweat. And with runners stationed along the way, messages zipped back and forth, keeping the emperor in the loop faster than you could say, smoke signal. But moving an army wasn't just about logistics. It was an economic feat. Feeding thousands of warriors was no small task. Maize, beans, and chilies became the staple diet, with the occasional protein boost from turkey or fish. Imagine trying to keep morale high on a diet that's basically the ancient version of a vegan meal plan. Yet these warriors marched on, propelled by the promise of glory, or at least a decent afterlife. Now, let's shatter some illusions. The Aztecs weren't just about the glory of battle. There was a cold, hard calculus at play. Capturing prisoners wasn't just about boosting your status. It was a necessary evil. These captives were the currency of the gods, destined for sacrifice. It's a grim reality that underpins the romanticized tales of noble warriors. Behind every victory was a shadow of human cost, lives reduced to offerings on the altar of survival. And then there's the psychological warfare. Forget mind games in the boardroom. The Aztecs were masters of the craft. They'd parade captured enemies through the streets, a grim spectacle designed to break enemy morale and bolster their own. Imagine being on the receiving end of that, not exactly a confidence booster. The sight of your comrades, defeated and humiliated, was enough to shake even the stoutest heart. But why go through all this trouble? Simple. It wasn't just about land or resources. It was about power. The Aztecs understood that true strength wasn't just measured in territories conquered, but in the fear they instilled. An empire's might wasn't just in its armies, but in the stories that spread far beyond its borders. The legend of the Aztecs was a weapon in itself, wielded with precision to keep would-be rebels in check. Yet, beneath the layers of strategy and spectacle, there was a stark truth. War was a grim necessity, a relentless cycle that demanded sacrifice, not just of the enemy, but of the warriors themselves. As you gear up for another day on the battlefield, remember, beneath the feathers and paint, you're just another soul in the grand chess game of empire. And while history might remember the victories, it's the blood, sweat, and tears of countless warriors that truly shaped the Aztec legacy. So, as we unpack the realities behind the myth, keep in mind that we've barely scratched the surface. There's a world of intrigue, politics, and power plays that await. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over. There's more to uncover, more to challenge, and more to understand about the empire that rose to such dizzying heights and paid such a steep price. The beat of the Aztec drums echoes in your ears, not as a call to war, but as a reminder of the relentless rhythm of duty and belief that governs every warrior's life. Let's dive straight into the heart of the Aztec cosmos, where warfare and spirituality were two sides of the same obsidian blade. Forget your typical Sunday service. Aztec spirituality was a high-octane mix of devotion, duty, and a sprinkle of dread, all wrapped up in a grand cosmic drama. Now, you might be thinking, what's the deal with all these human sacrifices? Trust me, it's not just a bloodthirsty pastime. The Aztecs believed that human sacrifice was essential to maintain the balance of the universe. You see, in their cosmology, the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world. Talk about setting a high standard. The least the Aztecs could do was return the favor. Picture this. The sun, that blazing ball of fire we all take for granted, was believed to be in constant peril. Without regular offerings, it might just decide to take a cosmic nap, and nobody wants an eternal night. So the sacrifices weren't about bloodlust. They were a cosmic insurance policy, one that required a regular premium of human life. But let's dig deeper into the political layer of this bloody tapestry. These sacrifices weren't just for the gods. They were also a potent tool for political control. Nothing says we're in charge, quite like a public spectacle of divine appeasement. It was a message to both allies and enemies. Cross us, and you might just find yourself on the wrong end of a sacrificial knife. It was the ultimate power play, blending fear with reverence. And let's not forget the economic angle. Sacrificial victims were often prisoners of war, and capturing them was a highly organized affair. It was as much a part of warfare as swinging a macuahuitl. This wasn't some chaotic free-for-all. It was a calculated move, strategically designed to bolster the state's divine mandate. Each sacrifice was a testament to the Aztecs' military prowess and a reminder of their divine favor. Yet, as grim as it sounds, there was an unmistakable allure to these rituals. The ceremonies were grand affairs, filled with music, dance, and a chillingly beautiful sense of purpose. It was a spectacle that bound the community together, reinforcing social hierarchies and shared beliefs. It's easy to romanticize these events from the safety of hindsight, but standing amidst the throng, the air heavy with incense and anticipation, the reality would have been both mesmerizing and terrifying. Now, let's bust a myth that's had more traction than a chariot race. The Aztecs weren't mindless barbarians reveling in gore. Their rituals were deeply symbolic acts, interwoven with layers of meaning that might make your head spin faster than a pirouetting priest. The heart, for instance, was seen as the seat of life, a sacred offering to the gods who had given their own hearts to create the cosmos. It's a grisly image, sure, but one rooted in profound theological conviction. And while we're debunking, let's tackle the misconception of Aztec society being universally grim and oppressive. The truth is more nuanced. Sacrifices were part of a wider cosmological and social framework. They were a means of ensuring cosmic harmony and social order, not just mindless brutality. In their worldview, these rituals were as essential as the rains that nourished their crops. But why did ordinary citizens buy into this system? Call it a cosmic quid pro quo. The Aztecs believed that by participating in these rituals, they were actively supporting the cycle of life and death that sustained the universe. It was a collective responsibility, one that transcended individual fears and desires. In a world where the gods walked among mortals, the line between earthly and divine was as blurred as a foggy morning in Tenochtitlan. And speaking of divine duties, let's not forget the priests, those enigmatic figures draped in elaborate robes and wielding ceremonial knives with a precision that would make a surgeon blush. They were the rock stars of the religious world, responsible for interpreting the will of the gods and ensuring the smooth execution of rituals. But before you start picturing them as heartless executioners, remember that they were also scholars, astronomers, and philosophers, deeply respected for their knowledge and spiritual insight. The role of these priests wasn't just ceremonial, it was integral to the political machine. They were the bridge between the divine and the mundane, mediators who ensured that the empire's actions were in harmony with cosmic will. In a society where politics and religion were inseparable, their influence was immense. And if you're wondering about the perks, let's just say they weren't short on offerings or admiration. Yet, beneath the grandeur and ritual, there lay a stark truth. The Aztec Empire, for all its achievements, was built on a precarious foundation, one that required constant vigilance and sacrifice to sustain. It was a delicate balance, a high-wire act of belief and power, where the stakes were nothing less than the survival of the universe. In such a world, every warrior, every priest, and every sacrifice played a part in a narrative that was as vast as it was unforgiving. So, as we peel back the layers of this vibrant tapestry, remember that the story of the Aztecs is one of profound complexity. It's a tale of cosmic ambition and human frailty, of power wielded with both reverence and ruthlessness. And while we've explored the spiritual and ceremonial dimensions of Aztec warfare, there's still much more to uncover. From the bustling marketplaces of Tenochtitlan to the distant frontiers of the empire, the story continues, rich with intrigue, drama, and the relentless drive of a civilization that dared to dance with the gods. As we stand on the brink of further exploration, keep in mind that we're not just delving into the past. We're unraveling the intricate web of belief, power, and identity that defined one of history's most fascinating empires. So gear up, because the journey is far from over, and the echoes of history are still calling us to dive deeper into the heart of the Aztec world. And so, as we step back into the chaos of history, we find ourselves on the precipice of the Aztec Empire's most dramatic chapter, the arrival of the Europeans. Picture the scene. It's 1519, and an uninvited guest named Hernán Cortés crashes the party with a few hundred Spaniards, a handful of horses, and a whole lot of germs that nobody asked for. If there was ever a time to appreciate the phrase, bringing down the house, this is it. Now, let's set the stage. The Aztecs, or the Mexica as they called themselves, had been on a centuries-long winning streak, turning the Valley of Mexico into their personal fiefdom. But all good things must come to an end, and boy, did it come crashing down faster than you can say Tlaxcala. You see, the Aztecs had a knack for making enemies. Turns out, demanding tributes and sacrifices doesn't win you many friends. Who knew? Enter Cortés, a man with ambition as sharp as a Machiavelli and just about as subtle. He arrives in Mexico with a strategic playbook that would make Machiavelli raise an eyebrow. First move, make friends with the locals who weren't too keen on the whole give us your people for sacrifice deal. That's right, Cortés allied with the Tlaxcalans, who had an axe to grind against the Aztecs. It was like teaming up with the office rival to dethrone the company favorite. Risky, but potentially game-changing. But let's not give Cortés all the credit. The real MVPs of this cultural clash were the pathogens. Smallpox, measles, and other European diseases tore through the Aztec population with a vengeance. Estimates suggest that up to 90% of the native population succumbed to these foreign illnesses, creating chaos and weakening Aztec society from the inside out. It's a grim reminder that sometimes the most potent weapons don't come with a blade. Back on the battlefield, the Aztecs were no strangers to warfare, but they were playing a different game. Their combat was about capturing opponents alive. Remember, sacrifices weren't going to make themselves. The Spaniards, however, brought a new rulebook, play to win at any cost. With steel armor, firearms, and cavalry, they introduced a level of warfare the Aztecs had never faced. It's like showing up to a sword fight with a machine gun, completely unfair, yet brutally effective. And then there was the matter of leadership. Moctezuma Roman II, the Aztec emperor at the time, was caught between a rock and a hard place, and not just because he was literally stoned to death by his own people. Moctezuma's indecision and the initial welcome he extended to Cortés as possibly being the god Quetzalcoatl returning, thanks to some prophetic mumbo-jumbo, didn't exactly bolster his standing. In the end, he was less a decisive leader and more a tragic figure caught in the gears of history. The final nail in the coffin came with the siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521. The once glorious city, with its gleaming temples and bustling markets, was reduced to rubble after months of brutal conflict. The Spaniards, with their new indigenous allies, blocked food and water supplies, turning the city's strengths into weaknesses. Tenochtitlan fell, and with it, the Aztec Empire crumbled, leaving behind a legacy as enduring as it is complex. So, what's the takeaway from this cultural collision? It's a tale as old as time. The convergence of ambition, disease, and technology reshaping the world. The Aztec Empire's fall wasn't just the result of superior firepower or unfortunate germs. It was the culmination of internal strife, external pressures, and the relentless march of history. Yet, if you think the story ends here, think again. The Aztec legacy lives on, albeit in fragmented forms. Their language, Nahuatl, still echoes in modern Mexico. Their engineering marvels, like the Chinampas, inspire sustainable agriculture today. And their mythology, rich with gods and cosmic drama, continues to fascinate and inspire. The Aztec story is a reminder of the heights of human achievement and the depths of our frailties. As we close this chapter on the Aztec warriors, let's do so with a nod to their resilience and ingenuity. Yes, they were fierce and fearless, but they were also part of a culture that valued art, science, and community. They remind us that history is rarely black and white. It's a kaleidoscope of colors, each hue telling a part of the story. So, what can we learn from the Aztecs, aside from the fact that wearing jaguar skins is a bold fashion choice? Perhaps it's that empires rise and fall, but the human spirit endures. We build, we dream, we conquer, and sometimes we fall. But in each rise and every fall lies a lesson, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond the myths and into the heart of history. And there we have it, folks, the story of the Aztec warriors, a saga of blood, spirit, and the inexorable flow of time. As you drift off to sleep with this newfound knowledge, remember that history is more than just dates and battles. It's a tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives, each one a story waiting to be told. So sleep well, knowing you've added another stitch to the fabric of understanding. Until next time, when we unravel yet another tale from the pages of history. Sweet dreams, history buffs.